Robbins.
Robbins. Okay, I'm going to call on you and ask you what you like to do. Okay?
Okay.
All right, so we're going to get started in just a minute. Thank you, David.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you all for your patience. We're going to get started in just a few minutes. Okay, all right. Thank you. I apologize for us getting out here a little later than we'd like to. We were in executive session. And so I'm going to go ahead and call this meeting, this TUSD Governing Board meeting to order. It is Tuesday, December 7th, 5:39 p.m. Can I get a roll call to establish quorum, please?
Yes. Dr. Ravi?
I did want to announce Dr. Ravi has a conflict and will be joining us at 7:30, so we'll make sure to acknowledge when he is in attendance. And Ms. Shaw has a family emergency and is going to be unable to participate today.
Ms. Luna Rose?
Here.
Ms. Counts?
Here.
Ms. Grijalva?
Here. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are 3 board members, and we do have a quorum. We're going to go ahead and get started. And the first item is land acknowledgement statement, and we have David Vega. He's a 2nd grader at Robbins K-8. David, what do you like to do?
Ride my bike.
Excellent. And so thank you so much for your willingness to read this land acknowledgement for us. What is your favorite subject in school?
Art.
Oh, that's a good one. I am not an artist, so whenever you want to share your work with us, that would be great.
I'm not either.
You know, I think that the fact that you like it, it's one of your favorite subjects, is a great thing. So can we get the graphic up so Mr. Vega can read along and lead us in the land acknowledgement? Okay. Can you see that, David?
Yes.
Okay, whenever you're ready.
On behalf of the governing board of the Tucson Unified School District, I, David Vega, acknowledge that the school buildings and facilities of the Tucson Unified School District reside on the ancestral homeland of Tohono O'odham Nation and the federally recognized tribal land of the Pasco Yaqui tribe.
Thank you so much for reading that, David, and for joining us. And if we don't get a chance to say it, we hope you have a really great holiday and enjoy your break.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. Next on the agenda is a Pledge of Allegiance, and I think we have Mr. Gonzalez, Gabriel Gonzalez. Thank you for joining us. I'm going to brag a little bit about you, okay?
Okay.
I have a little bio about you. You are a senior at Cholla High School. Go Chargers! You are your student council body president. Has been in student council since your freshman year. And he is an international baccalaureate IB certificate student, which is an incredibly difficult program. So good for you, and is enrolled in the CTE Pharmacy Technician program. Gabriel is involved in National Honor Society, IB Club, and is on the tennis team. Their clubs have conducted Thanksgiving food drive for their community, hosted the Viva Day of the Dead performance at TUSD middle schools. Gabriel is undecided where you want to go to college, and he wants to be a pharmacist at some point. Anything else you want to add to that very impressive resume, sir?
Not that I know. Just Yeah.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking some time on this Tuesday evening to lead us in the pledge. So whenever you are ready, sir, they will put up a flag and then we'll get started.
Okay.
David, you're going to stay on to do the Pledge of Allegiance with us?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, go ahead.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Gabriel. Good luck this
You.
for the end of this quarter that's coming up. I'm
Alrighty,
sure you're
thank
very
you.
busy, so we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Thank you. All right. Dr. Trujillo I'm wondering if we have any agenda adjustments. Might be having some connection issues.
Ms. Grijalva, we're trying to get Dr. Trujillo into the meeting.
Okay.
I just promoted him from attendee to panelist.
All right. So just give us a few moments with a couple of technical issues. Mr. Ross, are you aware of any agenda adjustments that?
I'm not Ms. Grijalva.
Okay. Well, the next item after agenda adjustments is
Okay, I'm here. Wow, I have agenda adjustments. So
Hi, how are you, sir?
Thank you.
Thank you for joining.
in time, thank you very, very much. Appreciate the team working hard to get me on. I have some agenda adjustments, and they are as follows. So what I'd like to propose, President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I'd like to move items 7.2 and 7.3 to immediately follow the call to the audience.
Okay. Okay. Any other adjustments, board members? Okay. Anyone opposed to moving those items? Okay, we'll go ahead and do that. And now we're on to Superintendent's report. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, if I can ask Jean to queue up our slideshow. I've incorporated some recognitions into this December 7th Superintendent's report to accompany my update, only because we only have one governing board meeting in December. So this is an opportunity to celebrate one last time before the new year all of the awesome news going on across the district with regard to the achievements of our students and staff. So with that, our first recognition, we've got students nominated for an Emmy Award, Tara Belger and Cosmo Brusa Zappolini. These are two students that have been nominated. The Emmy is a trophy presented at one of the numerous annual American events or competitions that recognize achievements in the particular sector of the television industry. We are so proud of them for being nominated. Tara is currently a senior at Tucson High, and her submission is the fiction short film Your Average Hopeless Romantic. And then Cosmo graduated from Tucson High in class of 2021, now at the University of Arizona Film School, and is being recognized for the nonfiction short narrative From Trash to Treasure, Matt Bevel. So congratulations to our two Tucson High Badgers, past and present. Our next recognition comes from Raytheon. Raytheon, of course, has taken the step of recognizing leaders in education through its Leaders in Education Award. So we've got a few Tucson Unified educators who have earned this distinction. Raytheon Leaders in Education Award recognizes and rewards teachers in Pima County that demonstrate excellence in teaching, leadership, and support for their peers. I'm proud to announce that we have 3 teachers honored. First, coming from Warrior Country, Ernesto Somoza Pueblo High School graphic and web design teacher. Next, coming to us from Pueblo Gardens Elementary School, we have pre-K teacher Patricia Perez. If I can get the next slide, Jean, so we can see Patricia coming out of Pueblo Gardens. And our third teacher coming to us from Dodge Middle School, teaches language arts, Mr. Christopher Ryan. These are our three finalists for the Raytheon Leaders in Education Award. We are so proud of them and certainly wish them the best of luck in the final phase of the selection process. Next up, we have a recognition from Tucson Values Teachers. Tucson Values Teacher organization, they always go out of their way to surprise classroom teachers for their Teacher Excellence Awards. And this time, they made a stop over at Pueblo High School to recognize Miss Karen Rimmel. Karen, in their words, Karen has a great passion for the students in Tucson. She just recently completed her national board certification, a milestone in the teaching profession that very few teachers choose to complete. She also has brought back the school's yearbook publication so that students at her school can be Pueblo proud to highlight most of the school's activities and awards. She spends extra hours both at home and on campus to make sure her students are challenged to excel in their studies. Many of her students have qualified for scholarships to colleges throughout the United States because of her guidance and her dedication. So we want to congratulate Ms. Rimmel for being recognized for teacher excellence by the Tucson Values Teacher Organization. Congratulations again, Ms. Rimmel. Our next recognition is for one of the district's most outstanding performance arts groups. I'm talking about the Sabino High School Sabino High School Saber Band. So Sabino High School Saber Cat Marching Band, under the direction of Saul Garland, was awarded first place at the Abota State Marching Band Division III Championships on November 20th during the finals competition at Glendale Community College. This is the first time that a Tucson Unified School District high school has won the State Marching Band Championship, and the first time that the championship has been awarded to a school in southern Arizona. The band received first place in music performance, first place in percussion performance, and first place in auxiliary performance. Their show, entitled Under the Stars, featured complex marching fundamentals, drill and melodic material by the band, colorful costumed choreography, and equipment work by the color guard. The rhythmic precision by the percussion ensemble rounded the performance and led to this tremendous award and distinction. Congratulations to this exceptional group of musicians and performers. Congratulations to our Saber Cats for this tremendous distinction. We can now call them state champions in marching band for Division III. So our congratulations again to Saber Cat Nation. We have a recognition for food service. The Arizona Department of Education, Health, and Nutritional Services is recognizing the Tucson Unified School District Food Services Department with a Gold Award for the 2021 Farm to Summer Challenge. During this challenge, TUSD School Garden Network served summer meals consisting entirely of local foods, provided student tastings, and educated students about the long history of native foods in southern Arizona. This is the second year in a row that the Tucson Unified School District Food Services School Garden Network has received this distinguished award from the Arizona Department of Education for the Farm to Summer Challenge. So I want to congratulate all of our food services team, our hardworking food services team, for this outstanding recognition by the Arizona Department of Education. Recently, Anna Henry Elementary School on the east side celebrated its 50th anniversary. I want to congratulate them for this half-century milestone, 50 years of serving children and families and community on the proud east side community of Anna Henry. I want to thank the school for hosting a wonderful weekend celebration honoring the 50th anniversary. I know we had a couple of board members that were able to make it. I unfortunately couldn't, but long to be there. So I'm looking forward to my next visit to Anna Henry Elementary to congratulate that proud community for 50 years of service in TUSD. We celebrate the centennial birthday of an amazing district advocate and educator. Happy 100th birthday to Cordelia Lundquist, who taught at Pueblo High School from 1956 to 1982. And she was very serious about teaching health and PE, and early advocate for physical education in our schools, and a diehard supporter of the Pueblo High School community. Thank you to Ms. Lundquist for supporting Pueblo. We hope that you had a wonderful birthday celebration, and we wish you many, many more years of health and happiness beyond the century mark. So we're very, very proud to celebrate your life of service to the Tucson Unified Community and our great city of Tucson. And lastly, on a sad note, I want to lead a moment of silence first for two longtime advocates of the Tucson Unified Community, one an employee and one serving proudly in our desegregation case as the special master / court-appointed administrative designee. What I'd like to do is speak to Claudia Deuce and then move right into Dr. Willis Hawley. And then at the conclusion of my comments on both Ms. Deuce and Dr. Hawley, observe a moment of silence for both as we acknowledge their loss and wish both of their respective families all of our best from the Tucson Unified Community. So first, recognition of Ms. Claudia Deuce. She was an energetic and vibrant part of the BRICTA Infant and Early Learning Center community. There was nothing that she loved more than teaching and being with her students. She had a natural love for early childhood education from a very, very early age that drew her into the teaching profession. There's nothing more than she loved going to BRICTA each and every single day and serving families and the children under her care. Our best wishes, thoughts, condolences, and prayers go out to the Deuce family in this most difficult time. And Jean, if I can get the screen share. There are no words to express the impact that Dr. Willis Hawley left on the Tucson Unified School District. We know him first and foremost as the special master, court lingo, if you will, for the court-appointed administrator that oversaw our implementation efforts throughout the life of the desegregation order, its most recent iteration in 2014. Dr. Hawley's legacy will be mostly felt through the integration efforts of this district that have led to over a quarter of the district students attending a fully integrated school, over 7,000 students now experiencing culturally responsive instruction, culturally relevant instruction throughout the Tucson Unified School District and all of our district's high school, a vision of family resource centers that could serve family and community springing from previously closed schools, a vision for two-way dual language programs throughout the district, and a vision for culturally responsive professional development for the students and the employees of this district. But I want to take a moment to talk beyond Dr. Hawley's impact on the district and the capacity that we knew him, and talk about his legacy as a father, as a husband, and as an advocate for social justice early on in his career in the 60s and 70s, before the terms social justice and equity made their way to the forefront of the national discourse. Dr. Willis Hawley passed away on Wednesday, November 17th, of natural causes at his home in Bethesda, Maryland. Surrounded in love by his family, he leaves an extraordinary legacy of academic leadership, public service, and family. Born in San Francisco, the son of a school teacher, He attended the University of California, Berkeley, where he earned 3 degrees, including a PhD in political science. He served our nation proudly in the Army as an intelligence officer after college, where he earned the distinction of sharpshooter. His early research on school integration helped to show the benefits of attending school with children from different races and ethnicities and the positive impact on attitudes, understanding, acceptance, and tolerance, and refuted assertions that it might reduce academic achievement. He taught at Yale, Duke, Vanderbilt, and of course the University of Maryland, where he continued on till his passing as Professor Emeritus. He published numerous books, articles, and book chapters dealing with teacher education, school reform, urban politics, political learning, organizational change, school desegregation, and educational policy. Fittingly, he ended his career working here for the Tucson Unified School District until the very end, with a decade of work as our very own special master in the court desegregation case in the Tucson Unified School District, where he brought his passion for racial and economic equity together with his deep understanding of how to improve schools and teaching together to support the district in implementing a comprehensive approach to improving schools for every child. One of the foremost thought leaders around desegregation and integration in our nation over the last 50 years, Dr. Hawley himself would say that his body of work around desegregation and integration are by far dwarfed by his life's greatest achievement, and that, in his own words, was convincing his beloved wife to marry him. He now joins her in his passing. She passed away in 2008. Dr. Hawley always kept her close to his heart and never began a conversation without referencing his wife. He is the proud father of 3 daughters that will survive him in death. And with that, I'd like to also offer the Hawley family our very, very best in best wishes, thoughts, condolences, and prayers for his family at this time. And as for our employee, we would like to, for both our employee and for Dr. Hawley, right now, observe a moment of silence for their respective passings. President Grijalva, members of the governing board, that concludes the superintendent's report.
Thank you so much, Dr. Trujillo. So now we're going to go ahead and go to call to the audience, and because Ms. Shaw isn't here, Ms. Luna Rose has graciously offered to help out, and so I'll go ahead and turn it over to her.
Thank you, President Grijalva. I will read the public participation at board meeting statement. During the call to the audience, the board clerk will recognize speakers and maintain order by setting appropriate limitations. The governing board is committed to the safety of the entire TUSD community. In order to observe the recommended safeguards for reducing the rate of spread of COVID-19, the following procedures related to the call of the audience portion of the board meetings will be observed. All public comments for the meeting were accepted in written form. Public comments will be read into the record by the Program Coordinator of Staff Services to the Governing Board. Our staff will make sure each board member receives a copy. At the conclusion of the call to the audience, the Governing Board President will ask if individual board members wish to respond to criticism made by those who have addressed the board, wish to ask staff to review a matter, or wish to ask that a matter be put on a future agenda. By law, at most 2 board members can address any single issue raised during the call to the audience. Okay. And our first letter is from Mr. Lawrence Harned.
Board members, thank you for your time. I hope I am in the right forum. Recently, there has been talk of banning books in schools in Texas, and more recently, actually burning books in Virginia. These things have happened in the past and have not turned out well. I was curious as to TUSD's policy towards which books are appropriate for students and who makes the final decision on why they are appropriate or not. Are there currently any banned books, and for what reason? Lawrence Harnett.
Thank you. Next one is from Ms. Betts Putnam Hidalgo.
Dear Governing Board, CARE has followed closely the changes made to the desegregation efforts and specifically the DATE program. We are sorry that there will no longer be an outside expert following TUSD's progress or lack of it on these issues. We do understand that the court has specified that the implementation committee will provide expertise in the future on the different parts of the desegregation order. In addition, we heard in the last board meeting about a superintendent committee to oversee on or advise changes related to the DATE program. What we do not understand is why that committee will be a superintendent's committee and not a governing board committee. From Policy Code BDFA, the major difference between a superintendent's and a board committee is that the former operates outside of the public eye and does not have to follow open meeting laws. Some of us have been on superintendent's committees and have found them to be largely pro forma. Input provided did not have to be followed and often wasn't. There was sometimes no accountability on follow through or even necessarily continuing from one meeting to the next. Such committees are often full of district personnel who have an obvious conflict of interest in terms of making critical comments on district policy and actions. We believe that there should be public accountability on the DATE program, and there should be on all items related to desegregation issues. Not only is there a moral and legal imperative that the district achieve full integration as per the USP, but desegregation funding comes from taxpayers. We have a right to both know how our taxes are being spent by TUSD and have some input into the process. Therefore, we ask that any type of advisory committee that oversees the DATE program be a board committee with call to the audience and community participation and oversight. CARE would be happy to send a representative to such a board committee. It is a matter of simply transparency that the community deserves. Beth Putnam Hidalgo for CARE.
Thank you. The next letter is from, and excuse me if I mispronounce your name. Next letter is from Xochitl Canzantes.
Putting critical race theory on students' curriculum in our high schools. When and how can we bring this important subject to our instructors and students? Thank you, Mrs. Xochitl Canzantes.
Okay. Next letter is from Dolores de Vera.
Board members, tonight you will receive a proposal about emergency certification for subs. The item is listed under study action. Lowering the required qualifications is kind of a serious thing. I urge you to table authorization for emergency certificated subs at least until next month. I would ask you to consider the following. 1, what fill rate or pool size actually constitutes an emergency, and how will you know when the emergency is over? What is your measurable SMART goal here? 2, are other nearby districts lowering their standards? If so, which ones? What results have they seen? 3, some districts around the county which use the emergency certification pay those with fewer qualifications less money. Educational institutions typically do honor greater educational achievement with better compensation, though TUSD often does not. What is TUSD's plan? Honestly, my real concern is that if you lower the qualifications, you will use those lower qualifications to justify lower pay for those of us who waited so long for you to raise the pay. It was only in May that Ms. Hauser told you that some really smart administrators had studied the data and determined that as long as the fill rate was above 75% in a building, everything was A-okay, because staff in the building could handle everything. Does she still believe that those really smart people said? Well, that report shows a 68% and 71% fill rates. We aren't that far away from 75%. You have all heard how long it can take from the time a person applies to TUSD to the time they get interviewed and approved, to the time they go through orientation and get started. Given how long that processing takes, I don't think we've had enough time to see the full impact of the rate increases. Anecdotally, I can tell you when a high school job gets posted, most are being snapped up pretty quickly. Anecdotally, I can tell you I received 2 text messages in the last week from subs who jumped back into the pool because of the pay raise. And I also met one sub who actually moved from Tempe to Tucson when she heard about our pay raise. You haven't even completed 9 weeks of the new rate, and you said you'd review rates at the end of each quarter. Even though there have been applicants for the permanent sub positions, I don't believe anyone has been hired yet. I urge you to give the increased pay rates and the permanent sub positions time to work before you look at lowering the standards for subs. At least table this for another month. Thank you, Dolores de Vera.
Thank you. Next letter is from Allison Minnie.
Hello, I have a couple questions. Why are the parents not asked for their input for mask mandates and other health-related concerns, but are sent multiple emails asking when we think the breaks should be for the next school year? Can you please provide me with the information on the long-term effects of mask wearing regarding both mental and physical health on children grades K through 12? I believe you are infringing on our parental rights as outlined in the Arizona Parents' Bill of Rights when it comes to these mandates. COVID is not going away, but the actions that you take will affect our children and the district for years to come. Thank you for your time, Allison Minnie.
Thank you. Next letter is from Dawn Stevenson.
Masks must be optional. My property tax and tax dollars are not to fund communist agendas. My children are mine. You do not control or govern my children. You care, causing great harm to my children and to many more children. Masks decrease oxygen intake. Breathing through a mask reduces oxygen intake below safety standards, impairing blood oxygenation. Masks increase toxic inhalation. Toxins that have normally exhaled as we breathe become suspended in the mask and are inhaled, producing COVID-like respiratory symptoms. Masks shut down the immune system. Masks decrease oxygen intake, increases carbon dioxide and toxin uptake, putting the body under stress, releasing cortisol, impairing the immune system. Masks multiply virus risk, encourages triggering an infection from dormant retroviruses already in the body, taking advantage of weakened immune system due to mask wearing. Masks are scientifically flawed. Virologists measures COVID to be 80 to 49 in size, making the weave of a material-made mask to be equivalent of a chain-link fence to a mosquito. Masks are effectively unproven. Absolutely no peer-reviewed studies have been carried out of mask efficacy within a social environment to control, prevent, or eliminate the spread of coronavirus. Through the TUSD social media page on Facebook, we've seen many of you mask-free as well as staff. We've seen multiple photos of some board members and superintendent mask-free at many campuses. It does not matter if you are in a hall and nobody is directly next to you. You punish our children for taking a breathing break. You all should never have a break if you agree with this agenda. COVID knows no boundary. You could have been infected during the time it took to take those photos. Any of you could have been infected at any given time with your useless mask on as well. You are only justifying those that want a mask choice. By going mask-free against your own rules, you are admitting those do not work. All you want is to silence our children and suffocate them. Dawn Stevenson.
Thank you. Next letter is from Guadalupe Henninger.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Trujillo, Legal Counsel President Grijalva, Clerk Shaw, board members, and everybody in TUSD. Thanks for your hard work. My name is Guadalupe Henninger, a TUSD parent since 2002. Our priority as parents should be that our students have solid foundations in math, reading, writing, and take care of their mental health. The pandemic have exacerbated the problems we had in our education system. As a parent, I have seen how our education system was before No Child Left Behind, during No Child Left Behind, and what happened after that. Let me tell you how we got here. In the mid to late 90s, we were working on an education system that was diverse, distinct, dynamic, that would get every student potential regardless of race, ethnicity, social level, and capability And because every family is unique and every student learned different, it was well-rounded and comprehensive to include every student. It was not about who knew the answer, but let's all talk about the subject together. When it comes to readings, some students are good with phonics, some are better with spelling words, or other with association of words. But in 2002, No Child Left Behind Act became law, which disrupted the well-rounded comprehensive education system we were building. No Child Left Behind was underfunded, was short-sighted, rated schools and teachers of the schools were failing, took away funding, fired teachers, and closed schools. That was the beginning of the crumbling of our education system. As a parent, I was making my kids study in the summer, gathering any supplemental material from library or bookstores so they would not fall behind. They were doing good. Honor roll students, but that changed in 2010. The state of Arizona applied for Race to the Top money, which was granted with the condition that we adopted Common Core. The state chose to apply. It was not a mandate. That put our education system inside a very small box. The legislation canceled Ames, which was the only true measure of how our students are doing. Behind closed doors without teachers and parents having a say. This new administration is working hard to fix their problems left by the previous administration, is rebuilding the health and human services, the Centers for Disease Control that were dismantled by the previous administration. Economists say Build Back Better will create jobs and improve our inflation. Call our senators and tell them to vote yes on Build Back Better because it's the right thing to do for our children's future. Sincerely, Guadalupe Herringer.
Thank you. Next letter is from Jean Kapusinski.
Dear board members, during the November 9th board meeting, Dr. Trujillo announced the plan to establish a DAPE advisory committee that will meet with administration. As yet, no such committee has been established. DAPE remains in a dismantled state with just 3 teachers in separate locations at FRCs. There are no high school math teachers. Catalina and Palo Verde students attend the campus from which they were suspended in violation of code of conduct stipulations. Middle school and high school students are combined in one room without the necessary services, support, and supervision. The FRC programs and staff and the communities they serve were completely disregarded in the unnecessary appropriation of their facilities for DAPE classrooms. During the announcement, Dr. Trujillo made yet another false remark regarding DAPE, stating that the committee would need to address the long-standing issues of DAPE, students not having work. In fact, DAPE teachers communicate with students' classroom teachers to receive coursework, resources, and assignments. If there is an obstacle or delay in receiving coursework, DAPE teachers provide instruction and assignments aligned with district scope and sequence. This process has been in place for many years at DAPE. Since August, Dr. Trujillo has been making false and misleading statements regarding DAPE to the board and the public, including false data regarding the number of students, teachers, hearings, and referrals. Dr. Trujillo speaks with authority on all matters pertaining to DAPE, although he has not visited a DAPE site since the first year in district, and hence has not spoken with DAPE teachers, students, and staff. The false information and deprecating statements are presumably intended to support a budget agenda to greatly reduce funding or specialized programs for at-risk students, including DAPE, TAP, and Project More. It is disturbing and highly irregular to hear a superintendent speak diminishingly about a district program. In this case, it is particularly dishonorable as DAPE had been presented to the court as an integral and successful program in the district's effort to achieve unitary status. Once unitary status was achieved, DAPE was summarily degraded and dismantled. This district community, including all employees, deserves honesty and respectful professionalism in word and deed from its superintendent. Sincerely, Jean Kapusinski.
Thank you. Next letter is from Sonia Apodaca Harms.
Good evening, TUSD Governing Board members. I write to you regarding Agenda Item 7.3, Funding and Project Proposal for the Improvement of the Tucson Unified School District's Capital Infrastructure. A marquee for Alice Vale Middle School is one of the items included for consideration of funding. I am a parent of a current Alice Vale Middle School student and one that attended 2013 to 2016. When my eldest was a student at the school, the parent organization and administration agreed on the importance of acquiring a new marquee for the school, and work was initiated but stalled out due to lack of an available district project manager to work with us. Years later, the need for a marquee is still present. A marquee is important to the identity of a school community and to make its presence known to the Tucson community at large. Since school sites are essentially on their own to promote their student programs, successes, and special events, a marquee is also a very important marketing tool for the school. Many TUSD schools have recently received new electronic marquees in the last few years, even though they had already had standing and functional marquees on their grounds, albeit older with manual message boards. Many of the schools listed in the current consideration for a new marquee also currently have functional marquees on their grounds. If the governing board, during its consideration of the aforementioned funding, requests me to cherry pick items to approve, please consider granting Alice Vale the marquee it really needs. Thank you for your time and consideration. Sincerely, Sonia Apodaca Harn.
And our last letter of the evening is from Lillian Fox.
Increasingly, over time, Dr. Trujillo and his administration have gradually restricted access to public information the board and the public have a right to see. He is not very responsive when board members ask him for information they need to make decisions. Supposedly, he reports to the board. They don't report to him. For 2 months, the monthly talent acquisition report did not show which separating employees were resigning, retiring, or were terminated. If that had continued, no one would have known when teacher and ex-ed teacher resignations were increasing, or if TUSD was once again laying off employees in hard-to-fill positions as it did last year. The labels for separating employees have been provided for the following months because only the board, not the superintendent, has the legal authority to hire and fire TUSD employees. That's the reason why the talent acquisitions report is on the board agenda for approval every month. Dr. Trujillo has been using his public spokesperson for some presentations to the board instead of the responsible directors and administrators. It's strange to use a public spokesperson to do presentations outside their area of expertise to the governing board. Recently, Dr. Trujillo established a superintendent's committee instead of a governing board committee to make recommendations to the board about dates. Unlike board committees, superintendent's committees are not public. They are private committees. No agendas, no minutes, and no votes are publicly recorded for superintendent's committees. There is no way to hear what they're being told. Superintendent's committees are appropriately used for union negotiations, not for fact-finding committees whose job is to advise the board. Even worse, in the past month, a notice was posted that all information prior to 2018 would be removed from the TUSD's public website and placed on a website accessible only internally to TUSD. Doing that wouldn't reduce the amount of electronic storage TUSD needs, but it would severely limit the board's and the public's access to public information about TUSD. The public would not be able to see that TUSD laid off all its elementary school librarians by misleading the board in 2014. It wouldn't be able to see that the board was similarly misled into putting nurses on a lower salary schedule that has resulted in their salaries being $3,000 less per year than teacher salaries. The board and the public wouldn't be able to see that for many years, TUSD has never increased the per student funding or schools' health supplies. And that furthermore, during that time, the per student funding for teacher supplies was even reduced. Finally, the public wouldn't be able to see that TUSD used to fund school libraries at $9 per student and compare that to the $0 to $40 per school, not per student, in this year's budget for many schools. Lillian Fox.
And that's the last letter. Thank you.
Thank you. And so does anyone, would anyone like to respond to a criticism or comment or ask staff to review a matter or ask that a matter be put on a future agenda? Dr. Trujillo, did you want to respond to any?
Yes, at our last governing board meeting earlier in November, the administration did commit to forming a superintendent's committee around date. I'll speak to the timeline to that. We have did January to assemble those members and begin that work. Obviously, November and December, very, very busy months, but we don't want the public to think that that is off of our to-do list, and it is a priority item for second semester.
Thank you. Okay, now we're on item 7.2 as requested by Dr. Trujillo at the beginning of the meeting, and that's consideration of draft policy GBGCC, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA Emergency Temporary Standard, ETS, Vaccine and Testing Policy. This is a first read. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, Governing Board President Grijalva, members of the Governing Board, as many and all of you in the viewing public, as many of you are aware, there is an OSHA emergency temporary standard that would require organizations of 100 employees or more to implement either mandatory vaccination for all of their employees or non-vaccinated employees submitting to mandatory weekly testing. The Occupational Health and Safety Administration, known as OSHA, of course, is the foremost regulating agency for working conditions in the United States. That order is temporarily on hold as the matter is hashed out in a couple of key district courts. However, not knowing whether or not the emergency temporary standard is going to stand, which would require TUSD to select one or the other, either mandatory vaccination of its employees or allowing unvaccinated employees to get weekly testing. We don't know what the future is going to be as the matter is still in court. We're asking the governing board to consider a policy right now in advance of any potential ruling that, if implemented, or that if approved, would only be implemented in the event that the administration's vaccine mandate is victorious in U.S. District Court. That is what we're here presenting tonight. So here to walk through the policy and the components of the policy are our General Counsel, Mr. Ross, and I believe we even have our Associate General Counsel, Mr. Michael Aronoff, also on hand, who is also a primary author of this policy. Gentlemen?
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. And I do see that Michael is on. I'm just an ornament on his Christmas tree here. So he's the one who did most of the work on this, analyzing the OSHA ETS and working with staff on creating this policy. So I'll turn it over to Michael.
Okay, thank you. So to clarify, just timeline-wise, one of the thing that we're looking at in that litigation that's currently taking place is that there's currently a stay on the enforcement of the OSHA standard, which could get lifted as soon as next week. So at the moment, OSHA cannot enforce it and won't enforce it, but it could come down the pipeline very quickly. We could need to implement it really quickly. So that's why we're here today and going through this. I am not going to go paragraph by paragraph through this policy. I want to highlight, though, a number of things in it. Basically, the policy that we have presented, and I guess I should backtrack and say, as Dr. Trujillo mentioned, we have to make a choice as an employer between mandating vaccines for all employees or requiring a combination of adequate face coverings and weekly testing for unvaccinated employees. And so this policy prepared offers the latter of those two choices. And most everything in this proposal tracks OSHA's own requirements. We're not making most of this stuff up ourselves. We're drawing directly from OSHA's standard. But there are a few things that I want to draw your attention to. So first of all, if you scroll down to probably the second page, there you go. The ETS talks about fully vaccinated, and so we have in our policy discussion about being fully vaccinated, OSHA defines it as being 2 weeks after your original course of vaccines. That doesn't require the booster. That basically means if you had Johnson & Johnson, it's after your first vaccine. If you had Moderna or Pfizer, it's after your course of 2 vaccines. You are considered fully vaccinated for the purposes of OSHA's ETS and of, therefore, our policy. We are required, OSHA, even if we're not mandating vaccines, OSHA wants us to incentivize vaccination by providing up to 4 hours of paid leave for employees to get vaccinated during their normal work hours. And that, yes, I'm sorry, and that's you go, perfect, scroll down right there. That paid leave is not sick leave, it's not personal leave, it's a separate bucket. And we've described the process. If you, I think, scroll down to even the next page, we have described the process for how, I may be on the wrong page, but how getting that leave will work. It will tie into our already existent COVID leave bank. And our policy does not include that same 4 hours for boosters since the OSHA standard leaves boosters out of the fully vaccinated requirement. Let's see, you can actually scroll back up just a touch. And that section that you're on right there discusses proof of vaccination. Our policy language about what type of proof we will accept tracks directly what OSHA requires us to accept as far as proof of vaccination from employees. But if you scroll down to that next section that says all employees, there you go, there's that box, even onto the top of the next page. It does have deadlines for proof of vaccination or deadlines for an employee's statement that they're not going to get vaccinated or that they intend to get vaccinated but aren't yet. Those deadlines that we have in the proposed policy were based on the original timeline that OSHA gave us in the ETS and their standard, which they issued the standard November 5th. They gave us until December 5th. And so that's what we had in there. We'll obviously have to change those deadlines. We don't know exactly what OSHA will set as deadlines if and when the stay is lifted on their enforcement. We would like to have deadlines. We propose if we're implementing this, promptly without guidance, without knowing exactly what OSHA wants, we would suggest February 1st as a deadline because it gives us time to get the logistical systems in place for us to actually track vaccinations and have everybody submit that. So we'll put that out there. If you scroll down, so that next section talks about the leave that we're going to provide. So you can scroll past that. We have a section exactly there, employee notification of COVID-19. That notice talking about when an employee has to give notice of a positive test or a positive COVID diagnosis. Those requirements, the timing requirements, are not from the ETS. Those track our existing requirements for calling out sick when an employee is going to call out sick. But the return to work conditions, which I think are on the next page there, those follow the requirements in the ETS, which are based in turn on the CDC requirements for conditions of returning to work. The testing requirements in that next section on COVID-19 testing, those requirements basically track the ETS. The standard requires that employees be tested at least once every 7 days and that they provide proof of those negative tests in order to continue coming into the work site. OSHA is, they've specified what sort of tests we can accept. Worth noting that at-home rapid tests, which are tests that are self-administered and self-interpreted, those are explicitly not allowed by OSHA, so we would not be able to take those as proof of negative tests. OSHA does allow for us to accept pool testing, and so our goal is to make on-site pool testing available at work sites at no cost to our employees. And then if employees chose not to participate in that on-site testing, they will be responsible for, for the time it takes to get tested and for the cost of testing. And as a last note on that, if someone does test positive for COVID, does get a positive diagnosis for COVID, then we stop testing for 90 days. That also follows CDC recommendations and the OSHA standard. If you scroll down to that next section on face coverings will continue to be required for all employees and everyone else on our campuses based on the temporary COVID regulation that's already in place, EBR2T. But worth noting that OSHA's requirements for face coverings are more exacting than ours. We track those requirements in this new policy. It does mean that we would have sort of a higher or at least more stringent masking standard for our employees as opposed to others on our campus. Those are the highlights. Those are the things I wanted to kind of draw your attention to in terms of implementation of this. If and when this is implemented, this is obviously going to place quite a lot of documentation demands on both us as a district and our employees. We have a team working and spearheaded by Blaine Young and Leslie Leonard on the logistical side, working with a software vendor for getting the software systems in place that would help us facilitate getting proof of vaccination, proof of testing. Employees would be able to do it from their phones or their computers, and we'd then be able to track that at a site or district level. So we have that sort of available in the wings if and when we have the go-ahead on implementing this policy. And in terms of the timing on that, they need about 4 to 5 weeks probably of lead time. It's possible that gets affected with the holidays, which is why when we talk about deadlines for implementing this policy, getting reports, getting the proof of vaccinations or anything else from our employees, that we want that February 1st deadline, because that gives us time to get the software up and running and actually start implementing it with some lead room for us to get everything together. And that's it.
Okay. Dr. Trujillo, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yes. Our number one concern is not having a policy in place in the event that the stay is lifted. We're very, very concerned about potential OSHA fines that could land anywhere between $14,000 and $15,000 per incident. So it is our recommendation that the board entertain conditional or approval conditional upon the lifting of the stay and the OSHA order being law in Arizona. And then just on a procedural note, President Grijalva, I know that we are going to have Dr. Gervoy Shaw logging on a little bit later. So this may be a question for either our Associate General Counsel or Mr. Ross. Procedurally, if we could proceed with this discussion and then return to the item at some point later in the agenda for an actual vote.
Is that, Dr. Trujillo, because Dr. Ravi wanted to be a part of the vote? Or
yes.
Because we do have a quorum, so we can move forward with the item. But if we wanted to, then maybe we should just wait on continuing this discussion if we're going to wait until 7:30.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Do either board member have, Ms. Counselor, Ms. Luna Rose, have an objection to that? Okay, so then we'll just go ahead and put a pin on this discussion. Mr. Ross, is that okay? And then we'll move on to 7.3. Because there's no point in having the discussion and then having the discussion again at 7:30. And then I know that he's already had an opportunity to review this item, and so I'll hold my questions that I was going to ask until we come back to this item. Okay. Then item 7.3 was the other one that you requested be moved up, and that's funding and project proposal for the improvement of TUSD's capital infrastructure. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, much appreciated on the accommodation for our remaining governing board member who will be joining us shortly. But in the meantime, our district administration, we are bringing forth our own version of an infrastructure plan for TUSD country. This is one of the largest investments in district infrastructure in recent memory. And you will see tonight our commitment to addressing a myriad of concerns expressed to us by parents, by employees, and by visitors to our campuses across 5 major categories of capital projects, ranging from flooring and bathroom renovations and signage, to gates and fences, to grounds and parking lots, to fire systems, to camera systems, to intercoms. This is a wide-ranging list of capital needs that have been years in the making. And here to take us through it, we have not only our Chief Technology and Operations Officer, Mr. Blaine Young, we also have Project Manager, Mr. Damon Ballesteros, to present to the board this evening. Gentlemen.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Trujillo, and good evening, Board President, members of the board. Damon's going to walk us through the detail of what Dr. Trujillo just described, and we'll be happy as we go through that process to discuss any questions or drill down deeper on any of the topics. And Damon, I'll turn it right over to you.
Thank you very much. Again, President Grijalva, Governing Board, Council, Dr. Trujillo, again, thank you for the opportunity to make this request for funding for project proposal for the improvement of Tucson Unified School District's aging infrastructure. Next slide, please. This capital infrastructure funding proposal is a district-wide plan that invests critical resources to valuable assets in our schools' aging infrastructure. This capital infrastructure proposal includes a push towards improving our building systems to optimize a total life cycle investment. We feel that it's a responsible investment within the parameters of what we should financially support, but also manage the completion of the work over a 1-year infrastructure investment cycle.
Mr. Ballesteros, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to stop you for just a second. Ms.
Yes.
Luna Rose, well, oh no, I think she's right in here. We just have to have an eye on the quorum. And so we just, because we have literally 3 board members. So,
Okay.
Just hold on just a second, please. And I would ask Mr. Ross, but we also. Okay, we're good. Thank you. Go ahead.
Sure, not a problem. Thank you again. Again, the goal is to complete the work over a 1-year infrastructure investment cycle, but with the majority of them getting completed within this fiscal year. Next slide. As Dr. Trujillo had mentioned, we identified 5 project types which are consistent with our multi-year facilities plan, facilities condition index reporting, and our deferred maintenance plan. These 5 project types, as identified, are building systems, grounds and curb appeal, HVAC systems, special systems and security, and roofing. Next slide. Our building systems, again, in detail, highlight, as we identify below, electric, which includes lighting, switch gears, and disconnects, painting, weatherproofing, plumbing, millwork, ceilings, skylights, restroom partitions, flooring, door openers, stage curtains, doors and hardware, ceramic tiles and window screens. Again, as part of our building systems, we try to integrate these independent items that are identified in our facilities condition index report to make these improvements for increased service life. Next slide, please. In our grounds and curb appeal, what we identified, again, consistent with our multi-year facilities plan, is our paving, driveways, parking lots, ADA compliance, our irrigation, our fencing, gates, playing courts, plumbing meters, ramadas, playground equipment, play and athletic fields. Again, these are the first items that are families see when approaching our sites. Next site, please. HVAC systems. Again, this has been a big push moving forward in really addressing our HVAC systems district-wide. We took a look at identifying these retro commissioning projects where we can really take a look at and bringing our systems up to optimal working conditions, chillers, air conditioners, boilers, energy management control systems, our air handlers in cooling towers. Next slide. In special systems and security, we identified the security systems, our fire alarms, intercoms, card access, and closed circuit TV for monitoring for security. In our roofing side, we took a look at really roofing replacements, more so in repairs and recoatings, gutters, downspouts, and flashings. Next slide, please. So how we identified these projects, we took a look at our FCI, which is our Facilities Condition Index System scoring. Each of those are identified in our multi-year facilities plan, and we broke them out based on the need per FCI score, with a 0, which is due immediately, based on a FCI score of 1.25 or below, a 1 year with the FCI score between 1.25 and 1.75, due within 2 years, 1.75 to 2, due within 3 years, FCI score of 2 to 2.5, and due within 4 years, 2.25 to 2.50, and then due within a 5-year inspection, 2.50 to 2.75. Next slide, please. So in doing so, what we've come up with is we have a deferred maintenance plan that identified, and we've broken these out for our entire sites by greatest need. And you can take a look at our deferred maintenance plan with each of these independent systems, building systems, grounds, HVAC, roofing, special systems, our needs that are greatest needs immediately. And these are just to get to a balanced state with our infrastructure systems throughout the district. Next slide, please. So we also wanted to highlight was really to take a look at these projects and where's the most and greatest need. And that is really paramount with not only the numbers, but also the graphic shown below, with our greatest needs being in HVAC and roofing. And again, we took a look at our FCI scores and really addressed those that are due immediately within building systems, ground, HVAC, roofing, and special systems, to really identify those projects to increase the service life. Some of the questions that may be asked with this graphic is the greatest need is in our HVAC and roofing. Why don't we have more projects? We've been very, very aggressive and successful in working with the State Facilities Board. We currently have approximately 31 roofing projects currently either in assessment, design, or construction with the State Facilities Board, totaling approximately $60 million. And then we have an additional 21 HVAC projects that are also in with the SFB, either in assessment, design, or construction. So when we took a look at the initial investment of $10 million, the goal was really to stretch those dollars to effectively address the needs in our building systems and really not just fix, say, one roof or one area of our HVAC. We wanted to really maximize the investment throughout the district. Next slide, please. So again, as we broke them out by type, we wanted to break them out by school type and see, again, where are those needs in our elementaries, K-8s, middle schools, and high schools? Again, it's to no surprise, those greatest needs are in our HVAC and roofing systems. And again, a majority of those are being identified currently with our State Facilities Board, which we've been very, very fortunate to partner with and have two big projects that were recently approved by the State Facilities Board, which was the Catalina roof as well as the Choya roof. Next slide, please. Again, just to put it in a visual context in regards to the need really throughout the district with our deferred maintenance and what that pie looks like with all those independent subject types identified, being building systems, ground, special systems, roofing, and HVAC. It really puts the picture really in place, if you will, when you put together a pie chart to really identify where those needs are throughout the district with this particular slide. Next slide, please. And again, these are our middle schools and elementaries, again, just to show a visual component of where these needs are throughout the district with our middle schools and elementaries. Next slide. So in closing, as we move forward, our request is in building systems, approximately $4.491 million, in grounds and curbside appeal, $1.391 million, in HVAC, $1.735 million, special systems and security, $1.4 million, roofing, $950,000, for a total capital request approximately $9.969 million. Next slide. So as we move forward, Renee Weatherless on? Renee?
Yeah. So I am here. Thank you. So I'm just talking about the funding sources. Damon covered all the different types of projects that we have on this proposed list. And I wanted to point out that we have already had some preliminary conversations with ADE on the availability of using our ESSER funding. And at this point in time of the 9.9, we are comfortable in saying that all of the retro commissioning projects would be eligible for ESSER. So at this point in time, the 9.9 would be broken out, 1.4 of ESSER funding and then 8.5 of capital funding.
Thank you. Renee, well, how much do we have in capital right now?
So as of the November financials, we're sitting with almost $15.5 million of uncommitted capital dollars.
And that's not including what we need for maintenance in general for the year?
That is, no, in looking at everything that we already have, we have open POs, we have projects out there, all of that, a lot of that is encumbered. So we are sitting with about that dollar amount for the remainder of the year. It's been steady at that amount for the past couple of months.
Okay. Board members, questions? Ms. Luna Rose.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ballesteros. Jean, I'm wondering if we can go back to a slide that showed the list of the schools, like highest need. I think the number one was Santa Rita. Yeah, there you go. Thank you. So perhaps some of our viewers might have the same question. So I'm looking at, I'm not picking on any school, so I'm just looking at the first one, Santa Rita High School. So it's in deferred maintenance. Altogether, $16 million is needed to upgrade or update Santa Rita?
Yes.
Okay, so that would be the same for all the schools, obviously.
So as it goes down, the total for each school is independent and reflective of each school as you go down the spreadsheet.
Okay. Looking at almost $180 million, $9 million is is a drop in the bucket for that, but it's a good start. And if I may take a moment to say that as somebody who's finishing her first 12 months on the board, to actually be able to make a decision to upgrade our schools in any way. When I was on parent boards at my daughter's schools, we were constantly lobbying the district and in turn our state legislature for more dollars for capital funding. So I'm pleased to see this, and I definitely support going forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ballesteros or Dr. Trujillo, one of the questions I have is we're looking at the deferred maintenance, and some of our schools may be going through sort of an evolution where they may or may not be offering certain programs. They might be offering certain CTE programs, maybe not offering some other programs. Are we looking at that and the potential changes to any campus and ensuring that we're dedicating the dollars because, it's not an endless amount of money. And, Ms. Luna Rose highlighted, the need is much greater than what we're going to be able to put a dent into. So I just want to make sure that we're looking at that and not renovating anything that isn't totally germane to the programs that are happening on that campus.
Yeah, I'll defer to Mr. Ballesteros, but having worked with this list and the operations team over the last month, getting ready for tonight, they did a great job picking projects and focus areas that need to be done regardless of program focus. Okay. And they're predominantly looking at highly trafficked areas and parts of campuses and some of the district's busiest facilities. We mentioned Vail. Vail is a large middle school. We've got pavement and we've got parking lot renovations going on. We've got building renovations over at Rossridge. So I think they've done a really, really good job of really kind of picking their spots, but I'll turn to Damon to add any more extra detail.
Yeah, again, just to reiterate what Dr. Trujillo had mentioned, in going through the evaluation for the capital requests, what we took a look at is really you have to start with the baseline data, and that baseline data is our Facilities Condition Index report that really provides us that roadmap on the greatest need and where we need to invest those dollars to really increase the service life of the facilities. So we use not only our Facilities Condition Index report, but we also then combine that with our multi-year facilities plan coupled with this deferred maintenance. So we want to make sure that we identify projects that are not only identified by our Facilities Condition Index report, but also in our multi-year facilities plan as well as deferred maintenance. And we target those, as I had mentioned earlier, to increase the service life to where the cost associated with the renovation upfront now is substantially less than down the line, where right now our cost to benefit ratio is more linear. Whereas if we wait and don't make the improvements that are needed, our costs become more logarithmic. The longer we wait, the longer the cost becomes. So we really strategically took a look at, our Facilities Condition Index, deferred maintenance, multi-year facilities plan to really come up with this targeted approach to make these improvements at our facilities.
And I'm completely in favor of going forward with this. I do want to just highlight or bring up the concern that there are a lot of projects in our district right now that are sort of on hold or kind of in between, different departments, whether engineering, and our schools have put in plans for, outdoor learning spaces, and those projects are sort of kind of in this bottleneck. And so I'm wondering, as far as priorities go, I understand that we have some really significant needs here, but how are we going to fold in all of these deferred maintenance projects in light of the bottleneck that we have for some of our ESSER-funded projects?
Again, that's a great question, President Galva. We've been very, very fortunate. We've hired a few new PMs, so our workload has changed drastically over the last 30 days because of the new project managers that we've hired. We've also are using our ESSER funding to help out with ESSER-funded project managers to where they're going to be handling the workload of these ESSER projects. So when I take a step back and take a look at our existing workload has changed drastically management-wise and resource-wise just by the addition of the new PMs that we currently have on staff. And we're able to distribute that workload now to whereas before we weren't able to because we were short-staffed. We only had 3 PMs to where now we're at 5. So again, I can comfortably say that with our current staff and workload and resource management, I can definitely provide resources to get not only our current ESSER projects in construction and completed, but also these deferred maintenance projects. Again, the biggest component is resource and load management, which we've seen, I've seen personally, a big improvement over the last month because we've been able to hire some new project managers.
So, Mr. Ballesteros, can the board get a list of the projects that are, like, what you're working from as far as the projects that have been submitted, what the timeline is? Because, you know, I'm on PTO of one school, and my husband's the PTO of another school, and we, you know, they've told us about all of these projects that are starting, and they have yet, you know, and that have been submitted, and they've yet to get going. So
sure, most definitely.
Yeah, because I think that it's helpful for us as board members and also for the sites to understand like where they are in the queue, so they can help each school community, you know, get excited about when the project is going to happen, but that, you know, there is a timeline that we can start to count on.
Sure, most definitely. So we do have, and we can share the spreadsheet with the governing board. We have an ongoing spreadsheet that provides updated information on a weekly basis as to the projects, where they are, if POs have been issued, if construction has started. So we can definitely provide that information. One of the biggest components in the ESSER projects, the big learning curve was really to sit down with the site and the site administrators to get a defined scope of work. What we've learned is that when we initially received this spreadsheet of all the ESSER projects, really there was just a generic scope of work, if you will, outdoor learning spaces. Well, okay, so what does that comprise of? So we had to go out to the sites and then really get their vision of what an outdoor learning space encompassed, whether it was shade structures, whether it was seating, outdoor electrical, USB, internet hubs. It all varied per site because the vision was totally different. So then we had to get quotes. And then those quotes really didn't align with what their vision was. And so monies had to be exchanged and reallocated and added to the project. So it's been a learning experience, but most definitely we do have a spreadsheet that we could share with the governing board that will provide that information specific that you're looking for.
Okay. Any other questions, board members? So, Dr. Trujillo, you're asking for action on this, and thank you, Mr. Ballesteros, for the presentation.
We're asking for action. Yeah, thank you, Damon. We're very excited about the additional project managers. I think that principals and school communities are going to see a significant increase in movement, a significant improvement in the movement forward of several projects that are in the pipeline. But two very, very important points of clarification as the board considers action. Yes, the administration's recommendation is for action. Number two, it should be noted that there, I believe in the amount of $1.2 million of this package can be covered by ESSER funding. So we certainly want to make that known as the board considers action. And lastly, we are asking for the entire amount to be allocated this fiscal year, this 21-22 school year, so that all the funds can be made available at this time so that our team can get started. So just some important information before the board votes.
Okay. Any questions, board members? Okay. So I'll go ahead and, well, we haven't had a motion, so I'll go ahead and move the item.
I'll second.
Thank you. I have a motion. I move the item and Ms. Luna Rose seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so now we're going back to our regular agenda after having sequence 7.2 and 7.3. And so we're on consent agenda. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the governing board, I'd like to present for your consideration approval of the consent agenda as arranged, items 5.2 through items 5.16. I'd like to highlight for the members of the viewing public as well as our board members, item 5.6. This is the intergovernmental agreement between the Tucson Unified School District and the Pima County Health Department that will open the door of the facilities and the schools and the places and spaces of Tucson Unified to offer vaccines for our kids, our employees, and our communities, particularly targeting the newly eligible category of 5 through 11. This is the intergovernmental agreement that will make that happen. I want to thank our partners at the Pima County Health Department as well as the county itself in working with Mr. Rob and Mr. Aronoff and Mr. Ross in putting this agreement together. So with that, I will recommend the approval of the consent agenda as arranged.
Okay. Ms. Counts.
I am excited about 5.6 as well. My question is this just for COVID vaccines? Because I saw it went through 26. So are we talking about flu vaccine clinics and different vaccines, or is this just for the COVID vaccine?
Dr. Trujillo, Mr. Ross?
So I will defer to Mr. Ross.
When I looked at it, I didn't see that it was limited to just COVID.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you to Pima County and for TUSD administration. I think this is great, and I'm hoping for years to come that we see lots of more kids vaccinated.
Yeah, because it just says administering childhood immunization services, so it really is open, which is great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any items to be pulled, or okay? So I'll go ahead and move approval of the consent agenda as agendized.
I'll second.
Okay, Ms. Count seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0. Thank you. Now we're on action items. 6.1, administrative appointment, reassignment, transfer, interim principal, Marybel Mccorkle Academy of Excellence K-8. And if you all are logged on to Board Docs, if you can vote online as well, that would be great. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, in advance of tonight's recommendation, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the tremendous leadership, service, and commitment of incumbent principal of Mccorkle K-8, Sandra Tiffold. Sandra Tiffold has been a foundational presence in Mccorkle K-8. Though not the founding principal, she is its second principal and has guided the district's largest K-8 campus through a crucial time not only in the school's history, but the district's history. Her leadership has been steady. Her ability to form and assemble amazing campus teams can be seen anytime that you visit that campus and walk in to some of the most amazing instruction that you'll see across our campus. She was one of the key architects in leading Mccorkle K-8 through the first years of its New Tech Network focus on project-based learning. We are going to miss her leadership and her steady hand over there at McCorkle K-8 as she resigns from us effective at the end of this semester. So we take this time to celebrate her achievement, her commitment, and her service to the district. And of course, we wish her well in her new endeavors, both personal and professional. And we look forward to a continuing relationship with Mrs. Sandra Tiffold. With that being said, tonight, to fill the vacancy on an interim basis, we would like to recommend Ms. Deanna Harris as the interim principal for Marybel Mccorkle Academy. She is the current assistant principal, and in order to maintain consistency and continuity through this very, very crucial point in the school year, we would like to see the current assistant principal take the helm and to steady the ship and land it the remainder of the school year. Of course, should be noted for the public and for our employees watching, any interim position requires the individual occupying the interim position to go through the permanent interview and selection process should that individual want the permanent position. That, of course, applies here for Ms. Harris. Should she decide later on in the school year that she wants to pursue the permanent position, she would be responsible for going through the permanent process. With that, I'd like to recommend current assistant principal Ms. Deanna Harris as interim principal of McCorkle K-8 effective second semester when we return January 3rd, 2022.
Thank you. Board members?
I'll move.
Thank you. Ms. Counts moved the item. I'll second. I do want to say thank you to Principal Tiffold. I'm going to have to go out there and catch you before you leave campus. But thank you so much for your leadership. So I have a motion by Ms. Counts and I seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0. And I see newly appointed interim principal Harris on the line. Or I saw her.
Hi.
There you are.
Yeah, I'm here. Good evening, President Grijalva, governing board members, Ms. Counts, Ms. Luna Rose, and Ms. Counts. Yeah, so there's three of us. I kept thinking Ms. Shaw and Dr. Shaw, but they're here. Thank you in spirit, and Dr. Trujillo. It is a great honor to be able to further our work and continue our work that Sandra Tiffold has been working tremendously hard over the last 8 years as she has been on McCorkle. I am really excited and to step in and to continue to serve the McCorkle community families and students and staff and faculty. It's been an incredible experience. I've been there for 5 years, and I am really honored, and I'm just thrilled that you guys have put faith in me to continue the helm in this time as we work to sustain the work that has been done.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Good luck.
Congratulations, Deanna. Best of luck.
Thank you.
Now we're on to Ms. Harris's former position, the interim assistant principal, Marybel Mccorkle. Dr.
Yes, Ms. Harris is going to need an assistant principal to help her pilot that ship. And so tonight we proudly recommend one of our Leadership Prep Academy graduates. He has been a longtime educator in TUSD, most notably serving at Palo Verde as the Freshman Academy Coordinator, where he also taught and coached, where he also worked, and then serving also as the 21st Century Project Coordinator. He currently resides in grants and federal programs, where he's been since 2018, and he is tonight our recommendation, Mr. Francisco Sanchez. We'd like to recommend him as our interim assistant principal at McCorkle K-8.
Okay, thank you. Board members?
I'll move. I'll second.
Thank you. Ms. Counts moved the item. Ms. Luna Rose seconded. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0. And I do believe, there you are.
Hi, how are you? Good evening.
Good. How are you? Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm super excited. Thank you, President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Trujillo, and all in attendance. I'm proud and humbled for this opportunity. I'm excited to begin collaborating and working with the Mccorkle stakeholders, parents, teachers, staff, community members, and especially the students. I'm here to support and serve and support the mission and vision of Mccorkle. Also, I have worked with Mccorkle as a program coordinator in my current position, but I'm definitely excited to also support Ms. Deanna Harris. I just want to finalize by giving a special thanks to my family, especially my wife, Nayeli, who is also a devoted educator and has always pushed me to be the best version of me. So, si se puede, and thank you, and go Mustangs.
All right, congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations and good luck. And Ms. Teefault is retiring, not resigning. And so thank you so much for all of your years of service at TUSD. And we look forward to working with you in your future endeavors. Good luck to you. Okay, now we are on to 6.3, approval of the purchase and use of supplementary materials for social emotional learning from Character Strong, utilizing a safe cooperative contract. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, this has been almost a year in the making. A focus of our administration has been looking to implement across the district a curriculum for socio-emotional learning. The leader of that effort has been our Assistant Superintendent, Flory Hewitt, for Curriculum and Instruction, who's worked with a team of educators across the district to make tonight's recommendation for a vendor to provide that curriculum. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mrs. Hewitt.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. Good evening, governing board members, President Grijalva, legal counsel. Tonight we bring forth a proposal for the adoption of a supplemental social emotional learning curriculum for our district. As you may recall, back in June of this year, during our ESSER presentation proposals, you approved the allocation for the purchase of our SEL curriculum, and we come forth to you with our recommendation this evening. I'd like to invite our SEL director, Ms. Julie Shivananda, who will walk you through our review process. Julie?
All right. Good evening, everyone. President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Trujillo, Mrs. Hewitt, thank you so much for having us tonight. We are very excited to share with you our work thus far in identifying a curriculum to support the social emotional learning needs of our students and our staff. Next slide, please. So the purpose, as we sought to identify a supplemental curriculum, is to identify a well-rounded social emotional learning supplemental curriculum to support the overall social well-being of all students to develop the competencies to succeed in a global society. And social emotional learning, or SEL, describes the mindset, skills, attitudes, and feelings that help students succeed in school, career, and life. SEL focuses on students' fundamental needs for motivation, social connectedness, and self-regulation as preconditions for learning. So that was at the forefront of our work as we sought to identify the most comprehensive curriculum for our district. Next slide, please. So our objectives in evaluating vendors for curriculum is we wanted to ensure that the curriculum was research-based and was based in the 5 core competencies as outlined by the CASTLE framework, which are self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. We were seeking to identify a curriculum that would support the above in providing SEL instruction and support through not only classroom instruction with online supports, individualized supports for students, group, family, and crisis support. And also very important to us was ensuring that we had a robust opportunity or an opportunity for robust professional development for all staff to understand the competencies, how to implement the curriculum, and support their own social emotional well-being. Next slide, please. So the main functions we were looking for was to be able to support all three tiers of instruction. Tier 1 is the support for all students to explicitly teach and proactively support students in their SEL learning needs for life skill building, self-regulation and coping, and social skills. And then also wanted to ensure that our curriculum identified resources and explicitly supported at Tier 2 and Tier 3 as we identified students that need more support in those different areas. So whether they need extra support in identified groups based on discipline or demonstration that an extra support was needed. And then that Tier 3, that top tier of supporting our most crucial students through supporting their own social emotional well-being was very important to us in this process. Next slide, please. So the process, we reviewed and identified potential curriculums. We did hold our required 10-day review where public was able to review not only all of the print resources from all of our vendors, as well as their online digital resources. It was on display at Lee Instructional Resource Center for 10 days. And we asked all public that did review to submit feedback to the Social Emotional Learning District Leadership Team, where we then collected all of that data as well as our own review and scoring to make the best decision possible. Next slide, please. So it is the SEL District Leadership Team's recommendation to adopt the K-12 curriculum from Character Strong to support the SEL needs of the students in TUSD based on research and review of multiple vendors. Character Strong meets identified objectives and functions of a research-based SEL supplemental curriculum to support the needs of students and staff across the district. The Character Strong curriculum is fully aligned to the CASEL core competencies, as we spoke of earlier. Next slide, please. So our proposed implementation timeline, as we are excited for the approval tonight, we will continue to move forward, and our plan is to work with district leadership as well as our SEL leadership team and elicit interest from all schools in becoming part of our pilot for the spring, where we can work with schools to implement the curriculum, collect data to inform our practices for a full implementation into the new school year. We plan to offer professional development at our Professional Learning Day in January for administrators, teachers, and support staff around the curriculum, and as well as the beliefs about behavior and the implementation of the social emotional learning competencies. And then in the spring, we'll do a pilot curriculum implementation and monitoring that data, collecting the data to see what's working to inform our larger implementation beginning next fall. That will include professional development to support teachers in implementation of curriculum, as well as support through their own social emotional needs and supporting the needs of our students. And then training on using SEL lessons and resources in the classroom and around our school community. Next slide, please. So in closing, we are requesting approval of the adoption of the Character Strong Social Emotional Learning as our supplemental curriculum for all K-12 in Tucson Unified School District.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, board members? Can I get a motion, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose and Ms. Count seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you so much for the presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much for your time.
Now we're on 6.4, TUSD ESSER 3 expenditure proposal. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, this is a quick item. We have our Director for Federal Programs, Grants and Federal Programs, Mr. John Lanza. We have two expenditure requests tonight with ESSER 3. One, additional teachers for academic continuation services, and then two, the professional development that would go along with the district's approval of the socio-emotional learning curriculum. Mr. Lanza.
Yes, good evening. Thank you, President Grijalva, governing board members, Dr. Trujillo. So this is a quick item. This is for approval, asking request for approval for these two items. The first one was actually approved during the November 9th governing board meeting as part of another item. So this is formally getting it on the agenda. And the second item is actually to support some additional staff for social emotional training, primarily our counselors and then some teachers to get social emotional training in place, also in conjunction a little bit with the previous item that you just heard about. So the second item that is on there, social emotional learning, multiple topics are going to be covered: trauma-informed, culturally responsive care, de-escalation strategies, Tier 3 intervention, trauma and resiliency, and it's through multiple trainings that really it's the registration is what ESSER funds are going to be used to pay. So tonight we're asking for your approval for these two items.
So just to confirm, Mr. Alonso, we did approve the first item. Now we're just ensuring that it's documented. That was a little confusing to me.
Correct. This was part of another item in November, so this is just officially getting it on our documentation. So I guess really we are asking, you're correct, for approval of the second item, which is new to you.
Like $26,325 for the
Correct.
social emotional learning professional development. Okay, I'll go ahead and move the item.
Second?
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
Ms. Count seconds. Thank you, Ms. Lynn-Rose. Any
Sorry.
discussion?
I'm sorry.
Go
Quick
ahead,
question.
Ms. Lynn-Rose.
How come the first item was not recorded previously?
Dr. Trujillo?
Yes, Mr. Alonso, I believe when we go back to November 9th, we went for the positional allocation, but we didn't attach any salary information at that particular time.
That is correct.
Yeah.
So this
We
is just
did
a
not
specific-
have dollar amounts with that item. It was approved for the two teachers for ACS, but we did not have dollar amounts. We didn't have an actual budget item to put on there. So that is what this is capturing.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, I'm good.
Okay, I have a motion, a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we're on extension of Families First Coronavirus Response Act, COVID leave through June 30th, 2022 for employees of TUSD. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, so this is another very, very brief item. I'll go ahead and do the duties here as our Executive Director for HR will be taking the helm on another two items coming up a little bit later. This one, quite simply, extends COVID leave reimbursement that was part of the CARES Act legislation that came through. We're seeking to extend it from January 21st to January 30th. And of course, this is a resource for all of those employees that are diagnosed with COVID-19. They get an additional amount in the amount of 10 days of COVID leave hours. And of course, this is based on their full-time equivalency. And of course, it's a very simple procedure. That procedure is not going to change. All the employee has to do is fill out or provide us with their positive COVID test result for themselves or member of the family. And of course, we verify that document and of course provide them their days. So that's the motion. That's a recommendation of the administration to extend this benefit all the way through the end of the fiscal year. So through June 30th, 2022.
Dr. Trujillo, I have a question. So have we discussed at all giving this option to our fully vaccinated employees? Because right now there's no requirement for vaccination in order to have COVID leave. And so I understand it for, so I would just like to see if we come back to the board in extending any of this that we consider, because it would be more on the incentive that if you are fully vaccinated and have breakthrough COVID, then, or you have a family member that is too young or, you know, has some sort of breakthrough. But this was one of the things that I thought made some sense as far as we're giving COVID leave to those who are fully vaccinated as opposed to just giving COVID leave to those that have opted not to get vaccinated.
If that is the direction of the board, my only concern is that we're going to come up on January 1st with no extended coverage. So if the board wants to entertain the administration coming back with an alternative proposal that specifies what applies to vaccinated versus unvaccinated employees, we would like to recommend at least 30 days of coverage.
No, I'm not suggesting that we change this. My suggestion would be that if this item should come back, that we have an option, because I think that is a good incentive for employees. If, they are fully vaccinated and someone in their family is ill, then they can go, or if they have breakthrough, because that's happening more often. But I do think that it's one of those things that can be listed as an incentive where you get additional leave and don't have to use your own personal or sick leave in general. These are additional days, like 10 additional days. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Counts.
And that was something that I had mentioned back when this was originally proposed, and I know that there was, at that time, legal issues around people that could not get medically vaccinated, and then we had a couple complaints about people that wanted to have religious exemption. I think that this has really gotten to a point where it's no longer us just choosing to do the right thing by covering everybody, but it's people choosing to get vaccinated or not. If they have a legitimate medical condition, I think that needs to be documented, and then of course we can provide that additional benefit of those 10 extra days. But I'd really like to just push this through sooner rather than later. I appreciate if the rest of the board right now would rather just continue this extension for everybody, even those that are choosing to not get vaccinated and endanger our community. But I do think that if this is a benefit, it's not required. This is a benefit that we are providing for those that are choosing to do the right thing and get vaccinated. So I just have to say that. But if it does come back, I agree with Ms. Grijalva that we need to look at those legal issues and have the argument already prepared and ready for how we will use this as a benefit instead of an entitlement.
Ms. Counts, if you want to make the motion to extend the COVID leave through January 30th and have the administration come back with a proposal that meets what you were saying, because I am totally in agreement with you, then I would be willing to do that if Ms. Luna Rose would be willing to consider that. It sounds like if you want to go ahead and make the motion.
So has there already been a motion made for this as is?
Have we made a motion? No, we have not.
Okay, so then I'd just like to amend the motion.
No, you're making a new motion. We haven't made one yet.
Oh, okay. So I move that we extend this through, was it January 30th?
Right. Dr. Trujillo asked for 30 days.
Okay.
Is that sufficient, Dr. Trujillo?
Yes.
Okay.
That's very reasonable. Yes, thank you. 30 days gives us an opportunity to flesh out the direction that we're hearing from our board members tonight and bring it potentially January 14th when we're back, or January 11th when we're back.
Okay, so I move that we extend this benefit through January 31st, 2022, and that we revisit it and have a vote on the 14th for the extension.
And the extension would be giving direction to staff to bring it back as that if you're already vaccinated and have COVID, then this would be a benefit extended to you.
Exactly.
Versus all employees. Okay.
Yes.
I will second that. Any additional discussion? Okay. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Counts. Okay, item 6.6, consideration of appointment to TUSD of TUSD employee to the Employee Benefits Trust, EBT Committee. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, we are proudly going to turn things over here to Mr. Mansfeld, who I believe is on the call this evening to speak to tonight's recommendation. But tonight, we would like to nominate as our employee representative / district representative to the Employee Benefits Trust Board, Ms. Renee Heuser, to serve. And to speak to the nomination is Mr. Mark Mansfeld.
Thank you, Mr. Mansfield, for joining us. We appreciate that.
You're welcome. First of all, I want to thank Peter Huron for serving in this position for the last several years. He did a great job, was very dedicated. And then he asked for personal reasons if he could leave, so this position's open. The trust document specifies that one district employee is on the trust, and it also specifies that they should have a background in this type of material, and Renee fits that. Renee has been essential to the success of the trust. She's there every meeting. She's very thoughtful, very well respected, and there was no hesitation by the trust to recommend that Renee be appointed to fill that.
Thank you. So I'll go ahead and make the motion to appoint Renee Heuser as the TUSD employee to the EBT committee.
I'll second.
And Ms. Luna Rose seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Item passes unanimously 3-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you, Mr. Mansfield, for your dedication and service to the EBT board and for your presence here tonight. We greatly appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Now we're on 7.1, TUSD COVID-19 Readiness and Response District Update. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, if it is the pleasure of the board, as we're still waiting for our fifth governing board member, this particular agenda item includes an administrative recommendation regarding an incentive, a stipend incentive for vaccination. And
Did
as
you
we
want to
would like
hold
our,
off on this?
yes,
one as
as
well?
we would like
Okay.
our fifth governing board member present, we'd like to proceed to another area of the agenda and skip directly to the item 7.4.
Okay, that's fine, because we've already addressed 7.3. So 7.4, consideration of job description for community engagement specialist.
Yes, let us welcome our recently appointed employee representative for the Employee Benefits Trust Board and Human Resources Director, Executive Director, Renee Heuser.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo, President Grijalva, members of the board. For your consideration tonight, we are bringing back for the second time the job description for the community liaison position that the board has discussed previously. We did make 4 modifications to this since the last time you saw it. We have placed this position under the Employee Relations Department with an evaluation model that will feature a joint process between the Employee Relations Director and governing board members. We've updated the position responsibility to memorialize the position's duties and verify the accuracy, timeliness, and efficacy of information that's going out to families, with a focus on retaining our families in the TUSD community. We've adjusted the salary so that it better aligns with our job duties. We've moved it from a much higher director level salary to that's about the equivalent of an elementary school assistant principal. We feel like this is a much better fit for this job and these tasks. And we've retitled the job description to District Family Engagement Liaison. We feel like this better captures the work being performed in this role based on the feedback that we've received from the board.
Okay. Board members, questions? Have a motion?
I'll move.
Okay. Ms. Lynn Rose moved the item. I'll second. Any discussion?
So,
yes, Ms. Count.
So I do have concerns about this position just being another administrative position. I'm not sure that the goals and the intent of creating this position will be most effectively met through this position. I think that they can be more effectively met in retaining our wonderful principals and site level administration. But I cannot support hiring any more administrative, kind of a bureaucratic position at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Count. So, Mr. Ross, we presumably have a split vote on this item, and since we're holding on to a quorum by just the 3 of us, should I just withdraw my motion and move on?
Mr. Grijalva, I'm not sure what you mean by split vote. I mean, there's 3 of you, right?
Correct. But so we just need a majority of this this
That's
group?
correct.
Okay. I guess the only concern that I have is that I really, I ideally would like there to be more buy-in on the position. And if, I hear your concerns. And so I don't know if there's any additional information that can be provided or if it's just a pseudo-administrative, an additional person, that's the issue.
There might be a way to convince me. It's hard to say,
Yeah.
but I'd say my primary concern is that it is a administrative position.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, Mrs. Grijalva, in the spirit of your initial statement, we also would like to have buy-in. We're also missing 2 other governing board members, and we've heard from Ms. Count some concerns. We have no issues pulling this item tonight. This is a prospective hire for the 22-23 school year. We certainly can bring the item back on January 14th when we've got a full, when all of our board members are present and can weigh in.
So, Ms. Luna Rose, would that be acceptable to you, or did you have some question or comment?
I'm fine with pulling it if would like to get other board input. I could not be. I understand Ms. Count's concerns about adding an administrative position, but in going over this and as someone who has a background in outreach and communications, I see this as a needed position for the district, despite administrative. I know everybody kind of gets scared with that, but sometimes you just need to jump in feet first. But I do want to hear from Dr. Shaw and Ms. Shaw as well.
Yeah, I do think that, it's not just the amount that is listed here as far as the salary. I'm assuming that we're going to have some administrative support and other things. And so I do think that, if Ms. Counts, if you could send an email to Dr. Trujillo kind of highlighting your concerns, and then maybe we bring this back at our next board meeting, Dr. Trujillo?
Absolutely,
Okay.
which would be the second meeting in January.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. And so 7.5, emergency certification of subs in TUSD and sub work preference survey results 2021. Dr. Trujillo.
Yeah, I'd like to turn things back over to our Executive Director for Human Resources, Renee Heuser. Going to cover 2 items. Number 1, what the district does and what Human Resources does to assist subs that are caught in the logjam delay of ADE, trying to get their Arizona State Substitute Teacher certification, and what HR does to get those folks an emergency certification so they can start working for us while they're waiting for their application to be processed. And then information we're excited to share. Ms. Heuser will walk us through a working condition survey that we facilitated for our sub workforce that sought to get at the heart of sub-teacher working preferences, from frequency, days of the week, schools of preference, grade levels of preference, to give our board members and our community a more detailed eye at the working preferences of our subs. So with that, I'll turn it over to Renee.
Ms. Heuser, just really quickly, I did want to announce that Dr. Ravi has joined us, so there are now 4 of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo, President Grijalva, members of the board. I'd like to welcome tonight our senior coordinator for sub-services, Deanna Reyes. She's going to help me with this presentation tonight. As Dr. Trujillo said, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that we're doing in the sub-office to deal with the national labor shortage, or what many are calling the Great Resignation. This has presented for us a significant drop in our active sub pool. I know we've spoken a few times about how our sub pool ran from 800 to under 400 this year. It's a historically low pool and historically low fill rates that we're dealing with. So in response to that, we've done a few things to try to ramp that up, to extend our reach. And one of the things we've done is we've been sending out regular surveys to all of our subs, all 800 of them, even the inactive ones, to gather information about what they're doing, how they want to work, what they'd like to see, to give us ideas and ways that we can incent them to come back. But before we get too far into that data, I kind of want to talk about the emergency certification piece. So next slide, please, Jean. The emergency certification is actually one of the things that we've added to our toolbox of recruiting strategies, if you will. And I'm going to speak a little bit more about that in a minute, but I also want to point out that what some of the other things that we've done this year to really try to, as I said, advance that reach and get more people actively working in our subpool. One of those is we've increased our online presence. Not only on our TUSD website where we've kind of revamped things, but we're really pushing out now to major job boards like Indeed, Monster. We're using LinkedIn much more aggressively than we were in the past. And we utilize Handshake, which is a platform that many of the universities use. Additionally, we've got somebody in our office now who's really focusing on our social media presence, and we can see that that's helped a lot. What that means is that we're really actively out there sourcing now, as opposed to just posting jobs and passively waiting for people to come to us. We're targeting groups that we feel like would be good candidates for this, and we're actively seeking them out to apply on a bunch of different platforms. A lot of the outreach that we've done this year has been very different from what we've done in the past. Deanna and her team have done a marketing outreach program through our schools that encourages parents to come in and sub at their child's school. We've gone out to the universities in the area, and we've started targeting grad students. And one of the things, this is where we sort of walked into the emergency certification protocols. Many of the students who are in the university working on their active teacher cert don't yet have that bachelor's degree, but certainly have some time and would love the experience to get inside of our classrooms. So next slide, please, Jean. So what we've done to maybe capture these folks and be able to bring them into our subpool is we've started looking at the emergency substitute certification. This is a certification that's available through ADE. We have not used it heavily in the past. We do use it occasionally in our district, but we haven't used it heavily really until this year. And we really wanted to look and see how we could use this to amp up the sub shortage that we're seeing. So what an emergency sub is it's a certificate issued by ADE. It's good for 1 year. It expires the January 3rd or July 30th at the end of the school year. It entitles the holder to substitute in a district that's verified we have an emergency employment situation and there's an absence of a regular teacher. It only allows them to sub in one district, in that district only. They can't be assigned a contract teaching position, and they're limited to 120 days of sub work. Next slide, please, Jean. What this has done for us, this has opened up a new group of candidates that we haven't had before. So those who are working on their teaching credentials at U of A are a great example. We do have some of those folks who've taken advantage of this. The requirements from ADE to get an emergency sub-cert are the IVP fingerprint clearance card, district endorsement of job availability, and that's the same criteria that we have to provide for a regular teacher cert if we're looking for an emergency teacher cert. The candidate has to provide proof of a high school diploma or GED, and then they fill out the application and pay the $65 fee to ADE. At TUSD, we also require a background check. We ask that they have 60 credit hours. And that is because our paraprofessionals are required to have 60 credit hours or the paraprofessional test. So we ask that our subs meet that minimum as well. And then we ask that they go through our sub skills training course, which is a very good course that we pay for, that's online, that all our subs have access to. So we've seen some improvement this year rolling this out. Excited to use it. Again, it's not something that we had done heavily in the past, but it seems to be working well for us. I wanted to let the board understand kind of how that works. And if there are no questions on that, we'll roll right into some of the data that Deanna's going to present to you tonight.
I have a question. Sorry, Ms. Counts has a question. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Do we have any idea of how many people have we brought in through this emergency sub-cert?
I'm going to say it's, Deanna, do you have a number? I want to say it's less than a dozen so far.
Okay. Well, I think that's pretty good considering how new it is. So, yeah, getting into Pima Community College, U of A, a lot of our early ed Pima Community College students would qualify for this. So, and then also I have a question, do our emergency subs still get the same daily rate?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I just want to share some of the results that we got from the survey that we sent out to the substitutes, help us gain some greater insight into what our substitute pool looks like this year. If you can go to the next slide, please, Jean. We did send out a couple surveys to try and capture some information surrounding our substitutes, what they rely on substitute teaching for. Is it their primary or supplementary income, what their average week looks like, and what their preferences are. We got about 90% response rate, but that's considering we sent this to all of the subs that could, in theory, pick up a job tomorrow. So over the last year, there's a lot of subs that have chosen not to work since the pandemic, but we chose as a district not to terminate them because we're trying to re-engage them and have them return. So considering we sent this to over 700 subs, we feel like we got a good response rate and it was able to give us a good picture of what our pool looks like. So next slide, please. So just to kind of go back and compare, before the pandemic, we had 810 substitute teachers who at least worked one assignment and got paid for a day. This year we have 460. So that kind of shows you what we're dealing with, a little paint the picture of, we're dealing with almost a 50%, substitute pool that we're used to. So it really has made us change the way that we look at things, that we work with our subs in our schools to help provide, the best coverage possible. So next slide, please. So one of the questions we had was, do substitute teachers rely on substitute teaching jobs as their primary source of income, or is it supplementary? We found that it, in most cases, is just a supplemental income, which we were not surprised to see. Our substitute teacher pool includes retired teachers, recent graduates, current grad students, other educators or professionals entering substitute as a second career. So a lot of the appeal of substitute teaching is that flexible schedule. You get to choose when you work. So this number was not very surprising to us, but that's kind of what our breakup looks like. Next slide, please. So regarding the work week for our current substitute teacher pool, we found that like 59% of our subs, at least like over half, work part-time. They are not dedicated to working a full schedule every week throughout the year. We have quite a large other category, which kind of has other restrictions that subs have. So sometimes they only work certain times a year, as they have time, but definitely more than half have some sort of restriction to their schedule and are not available to work every single day of the school year. Next slide, please. And now going into assignment preferences, we asked our subs, how do you choose an assignment? What do you rate as the highest importance? We found that grade level and subject was rated number 1. That makes sense. Not everyone is comfortable in teaching all subjects, all grade levels. And a close second was location. So we asked them if they prefer to work daily assignments, long-term assignments, or if they are open and enjoy both equally. So that kind of shows the breakout there, which that information is very helpful because for sites that are looking for a long-term sub, we kind of have a pool to tap into and reach out in case they're having trouble finding their own sub for an extended coverage, whether the teacher is out on FMLA or it's a vacancy, which we have a lot, during the beginning of the year. So next slide, please. Then we tapped into a little bit further the school preferences. So we just wanted to know if subs in our pool were open to working in any location, if they were exclusive to a school or a subset of schools or regions. We found that, yeah, the majority of our substitute teachers indicated some sort of preference, excuse me, to working just in a select subset of schools in our district. When asked about what criteria they look at to choose a school, these were the main things. So past experiences, was it a positive experience last time they went there? Was it negative? If it was negative, then they're likely not going to return. If it was positive, they'll continue to return to that school. And that's, with the administration, with the students, or with the teacher. The other criteria was grade level. Kind of what we talked about earlier, not every person is a subject matter expert in every grade level or topic. And then third was commute. Although when we asked how far are you willing to drive for work, the majority of our subs said that they would drive up to 25 miles. So that's, across town, like we can get to most of our schools within 25 miles. So that really tells us that if school substitutes have a positive experience at schools, then they are willing to make the drive. So that's good information for us to help implement and work with our schools if we ever get feedback about anything negative that went on. Next slide, please. So now just for a fill rate update from the last meeting when we got the rate increase approved. This is what our fill rates have looked like this year. And, this is comparing to in the past, we've always been in the 80, 90 fill rate year after year. Last year and this year being the exception. So the year we started in August with a really historically low fill rate of 58%. It went up slightly, and then in October it was the highest when the rate increase was approved. We do feel like that kind of caused some conversation and interest in subs returning to TUSD, but then we see November it dipped down a little bit again. So if we compare right before the increase to right after the increase, what the fill rate is, you see about less than a 6% difference there. So there was a difference, but not very significant, which is, mirrored in our other neighboring districts who also did increases. They're not seeing that it made a huge impact on the fill rates. Next slide, please. So that's what we were able to find. Again, all of this information has been very useful in us trying to be more creative in our strategies and trying to recruit subs. But that's what I have for you today. Any questions?
Board members, questions? I want to thank you for putting out the survey. I think that information is really helpful. And what I've learned from the sites that at least my children attend and those that I talk to, like when I arrive to a school like earlier in the morning, most schools have a list of their subs that they call. And so I did think about that when we're talking about the fill rates. And historically, we've always had a hard time at the schools that seem to be on our outskirts, especially on the south and west sides. Those historically, I remember with Hohokam, we had to give additional incentives when that school was open because otherwise it was really difficult. And I have a friend of mine who is a teacher who says, when a teacher's out, we're all just redistributing their students in our classrooms, which changes the curriculum that we were going to teach that day. We make it work, but it is having an impact on the rest of our classes. And so I do think it's important for us to do what we can to support our campuses and ensure that there's coverage when they need it. And so I think it's important for us to do what we can. Dr. Trujillo, did you want to add anything?
That how long on Zoom? I'm still not unmuting myself. To me, there's two really big two big learnings for me. 68% of our subs rely on the work as supplemental. I thought it was the reverse. I thought I would have ventured to say 70% of our subs rely on the work as a full-time as a full-time job. So to me, that was a new learning, that the overwhelming majority of at least the respondents utilize subbing on a part-time basis as kind of supplementary income. And then I was also very happy to see, though small, we are showing some progress with fill rates, which mean that the rate increases are meaningful, that was an important tool that we had to utilize in order to start moving forward. So I think if I had a third learning, the overwhelming majority of our subs prefer the daily assignments. And that to me just kind of affirmed how difficult it is to get subs to take those long-term assignments that last a quarter, a semester, or even a year. So I do want to thank Diana, the sub office, and HR for putting this information together.
I have a question, Mr.
Ms.
Hall.
Counts.
What was our fill rate in 1920? Do you have that?
I'd have to go back and check exactly, but we've always been like high 80s.
High
fill rate.
80s. Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, and this is just an information item, correct, Dr. Trujillo?
Yes, this is just an information item. Board member Counts wanted to know, I made a request about emergency certification routes for subs waiting for the application process. And then we also had the survey in the works. So both of them are informational items.
Okay, thank you. So now we're on consideration of the Arizona School Boards Association ASBA bylaw change proposal. This is an item that was initiated by the governing board. Ms. Luna Rose, as our representative, did you want to go over this item? Because I know it requires board action in order for you to be able to vote on it as an individual.
Yes. Thank you, President Grijalva. So as a delegate to the ASBA, Arizona School Board Association, they have asked boards across the state to do a bylaw change. And thank you, Jean, for putting that up. It's a bylaw proposed by the Hispanic Native American Indian Caucus, which would create an extra seat on the ASBA Board of Directors. So there would be, instead of a seat for that particular caucus, it would have 2 seats from the caucus. So 1 Latino, 1 Native American member of the ASBA that's on the caucus. Currently, the Black Caucus has full representation, and so this would allow for representation of both parties. And right now, there's just 1 seat on the board, and they have to alternate every 2 years. So this would just make it more fair and equitable, and hoping that my colleagues will agree so I can vote. The vote is due on Friday the 13th, and then next week at the ASBA ASA meeting, the results will be announced.
Okay, did you want to move the item? It's one of those items that you're like, why did it take so long,
Right, exactly.
It just seems to me
So
crazy.
yes, I would like to move the item.
Okay,
I'll second.
thank you. Ms. Luna Rose moved the item, Ms. Count seconds. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you for bringing that to us, and I'm glad you're able to vote on it.
Thank you.
And now 7.7 Governing Board Policy KHB, advertising in schools. This is a first read. Dr. Trujillo? Or
Yes, at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Well, he is a doc. He's got a JD, our General Counsel, Rob Ross. First read of a policy that it doesn't seek to limit or prevent schools from advertising, but it does allow, this policy would allow the governing board to set procedures and also parameters around the kinds of businesses and entities that it would accept money from or that it would authorize to advertise. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Ross.
Thank you, Dr. Trujillo. The board looked at this first back on November 9th, and the feedback that we got back at that point was the board wanted to make it clear what the revenue stream was going to be, and what this proposal is at this point. We did address that, saying that this draft says that 90% of the revenue would go back to the site that generated it on advertising, with 10% for the administration to address what the administrative responsibilities are, which is reviewing content and establishing contracts and such. But of course, that's up for board discussion. Dr. Trujillo mentioned the content and who the board might want to prescribe in terms of whether or not they want to accept advertising. That's not specified in here, but certainly that's something that we'd want the board's feedback on if that's something the board's interested in. In terms of content, this policy's draft has very high level, and there's two categories, actually three. No, there's two. There's the statutory categories of guidelines for content, and that's in ARS 15342, that any advertising would have to be age appropriate, doesn't promote any substance that's illegal for minors, such as alcohol, tobacco, drugs, or gambling, and comply with the state sex education policy of abstinence. I'm surprised that they did not put in their policy another legal requirement, which is the prohibition against using district resources to influence the outcome of elections. So I would add that as another statutory limitation, so no political advertising would be permitted on district property. The ones that we've added here that aren't statutory are at a very high level, respectful of all people, not discriminating on the basis of race, color, gender, national origin, ethnicity, age, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, religion. All of our non-discrimination policy protections that we wanted to make sure that no advertising was going to violate any of those principles, and that would be something that the advertising content committee or group that's led by the administration would have to keep an eye out for. But again, this is a first read. We can certainly take board feedback or community feedback on whether there are other parameters that the board would want to set on content or advertising partners.
Board members, do you have any suggestions? Again, it's a first read, so we can look it over and bring it back. We can put it forward through the public process. You have some options.
I'll move.
Ms. Counts? Okay. Okay, Ms.
I'll
Counts.
second.
Ms. Counts moved the item. Ms. Luna Rose seconds. And again, this goes out for the public process, so we'll get information and feedback from our community on this item. All right, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item passes unanimously 4-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
And so now we'll go back up to 7.1. This is TUSD District COVID-19 Readiness and Response District Update. We postponed both 7.1 and 7.2 until Dr. Ravi could join us. And so this is update November 9th through December 7th. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, President Grijalva, board members. So we have, of course, this item delayed from earlier. And we have three areas here in this particular agenda item. Number one, I'm going to turn it over to Leslie just to provide a brief update on vaccine availability in the district and status and progress on classroom level pool testing. And then the third piece of this item is our administrative recommendation to provide stipends to employees to secure vaccines. So before we get to the administrative recommendation for which we're seeking action, we'll go ahead and turn this over to Leslie for our vaccine availability update and progress on pool testing.
Great, thank you. Good evening, President Grijalva, board members, Dr. Trujillo and Mr. Ross. As Dr. Trujillo mentioned, we'll be talking about two different areas. One is talking about the Pima County vaccination clinics and where we stand, as well as an update on the concentric pool testing. Jean, next slide. Oops, one more, please. So with Pima County, we've recently had several clinics with them at both Holiday and Lawrence. We also just found out yesterday that they've scheduled 6 other clinics within our schools on the south and west side over the next 2 weeks. So that's good news for us. They have also opened, and we have shared with our community about these clinics, as well as the TCC vaccination clinic that they have available Monday through Saturday. That's no appointment necessary. And we are working with Pima County to try and get more clinics going in our schools. They do have a backlog due to some changes that they've undertaken, but we're hopeful, since some things were scheduled the last couple days, that we'll start to get some of our other requests and clinics in some additional schools. In the appendix, you'll see a listing of all of the clinics that Pima County has documented, how many people have attended the clinic, what type of vaccine, and the number of vaccines we've given out. I think they are missing some of the clinics we may have had, but it is a fairly comprehensive list, just to give you an idea. Next slide. And so as far as concentric pool testing, as you are all aware, we are doing weekly testing in all of our schools and at 1010. Starting next week, we will be rolling out testing at our other 12 facilities where we have only staff, our transportation hubs, LURC, the other various facilities we have around the district. So far, since the end of September, we have done over 2,300 pooled tests, which is over 25,000 actual tests on individuals. We have only had 184 positive cases because of that pooled testing, which means that our prevalence rate is at 0.71, which is still well below the national average of 4%, which is what I was told when we started this process with concentric. But the concern is we only have a participation rate of 14% throughout our district. We have promoted it a number of times, looked at different options. So I've been speaking with Concentric on how we increase this. They have also a number of other schools in the West that have this same challenge. So starting in January, we thought we would start a couple of forums, both in English and Spanish, with the Concentric staff, really explaining what pool testing is, kind of overcome some of the myths that some people might have as a starting point. And then we've also asked them to start working on some additional marketing tools that we can share and put in our buildings that might be the top reasons that you want a pool test. And we would have those in multiple languages as well, or in just in a graphic visual, so it's easier for, since we do have a number of different languages in our community, easier for people to do them and might help them feel better about pool testing. Next slide. I think that's it. So is there any questions?
Any questions, board members? I don't. Oh, Dr. Ravi, go ahead. I'm sorry.
All right, guys, I'm going to unmute. A question on the positive case. Is that 184 positive pools or individuals who have been positive amongst the 25 or 23,000 or how many thousand that we have tested?
It's 184 positive individuals.
Okay, so from the second testing that we do. Okay.
Yes, from the second Binax Now test.
Yeah. Just to give you an idea of positivity rates in Pima County, at the end of May, we were at about 2%. Right now, we're at about 12%. And we're testing a lot more often. So I think more people are more likely to get tested. I know that we're testing more on our campuses, which I appreciate. But our numbers are still fairly high in our community in general. Any other questions, board members? Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Leslie.
All right.
And so
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
the remaining item is our administrative recommendation. In our continuing commitment to ensure that the Tucson Unified School District, as one of the county's largest employers, does everything possible, employs every possible tool to minimize the spread of COVID-19, not just in our schools, but in our community and in our city. we want to incentivize employees to the maximum extent possible to receive the vaccine in the spirit of this effort. That will keep our families, our employees, and our kids as healthy as possible through what promises to be a very, very difficult holiday season with respect to COVID-19 transmission throughout the city and the county. So we are proposing a $500 one-time stipend for all employees who are vaccinated. To receive the stipend, we are proposing that an employee must have received 2 doses of either Moderna or Pfizer or 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson. Now, in addition to this recommendation, if somebody has also received a booster shot, we are proposing that the individual receive an additional $100. So this individual, having both doses of the Moderna and the Pfizer shot, and the 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson, if this particular individual had the booster shot, they would be eligible to receive an additional $100 for a total of $600. If somebody who is just starting their vaccine journey now is able to successfully get their 2 vaccines, they would be eligible for the $500 payment. This recommendation applies to employees who work for the district or have worked with the district at some point between January 4th, 2022 and June 30th, 2022. These employees who work for the district at these points of time are also going to be eligible for both stipends. We are very, very clear in this recommendation that this applies to those that work for the district during these time periods. This recommendation applies to all of our leased employees that come through us through the ESI program or that they're hired directly to the district as retireed employees working for us. In this case, our teachers that come back to us, and most recently our counselors. And this applies for our substitutes. We recommend that the governing board consider allocating approximately $3 to $5.8 million of our ESSER funds to be able to allocate towards this stipended recommendation. We would ask that this dollar amount be allocated for these vaccine stipends so that in January we can come back to you with definitive dates for payment, because it's going to take the administration some time to be able to set up the appropriate processes and procedures, specifically a tracking system, to be able to ensure that we have accurate data regarding the amount of employees that would be eligible for receiving the stipend, either the $500 stipend for receiving the 2 doses of Moderna, 2 doses of Pfizer, or the 1 shot Johnson & Johnson, or the $600 stipend that would be eligible for those employees that have the 2 shots of Moderna, 2 shots of Pfizer, 1 shot of Johnson & Johnson, plus stipend. We believe that incentives work. We have seen and heard of the success of the incentivized approach at the county. We would like to follow the same lead here. And lastly, we are looking to make this recommendation for the employees that have received the above stated doses prior to June 30th, 2022. And that's our recommendation for COVID-19 vaccination incentive stipends.
Okay, and Dr. Trujillo, just to clarify, this does not, it doesn't matter who, if they are full or part-time employees, the stipend is the same?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, board members.
I'd like to move the item.
Thank you, Ms. Counts.
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. Luna Rose. We have a motion and a second. I agree with you, Dr. Trujillo. I think incentives are much more compelling than the disincentives, and we don't know when or if we're going to have to impose some of those disincentives, but I would rather try to encourage. And just another thing, just to confirm, because I know we'll hear it again, this applies to those employees that have already received their first, second dose and booster without any incentives. They would still qualify for this incentive. correct?
Absolutely.
Great.
Absolutely.
So it applies to every employee. It doesn't matter when you were vaccinated, but I encourage you to get boosted if you haven't. Okay. A motion to second. Any discussion? Dr. Ravi.
Sure, a couple of just points and questions. So you mentioned that it won't be prorated based on FTE. For substitute teachers, is that based on number, like they just work once for the district during the January to June timeframe, or a certain amount of days to qualify for this incentive?
You only have to have worked once.
And then just, you mentioned it in your comments, but I want to make sure everyone understands this is not coming from our maintenance and operation budget, not coming from our annual budget. This is coming specifically from our COVID relief funds, or one of our 3 ESSER packages that we received from the 3 COVID relief funds that were passed federally. So this is coming from funds that were meant to help with mitigation strategies and make our schools safer and healthier for the community.
Absolutely, Dr. Gravoy-Shaw. This is 100% ESSER funded.
Any additional questions? I have a motion in a second.
I have
I'm
a
sorry, Ms.
comment.
Counts, go ahead.
I'm just really excited at the generosity of this benefit. It makes me want to work for TUSD. But it's just, I really think it's a positive step, and it's really encouraging. So thank you, administration, and thank you to this board for supporting it.
Yeah, I do think the county's incentive was 300.
Yeah,
and I do think that that was the largest movement of people getting vaccinated. So I hope that this is that much more encouraging. All right, we have a motion to second. All in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Item passes unanimously. Thank you. Okay. Now we are on to, what? 9.1? Are we done? No.
Well, we want to circle back and cover the discussion on the potential emergency temporary standard.
Oh, I apologize. I got excited for a minute. I'm like, what? Well, I thought that we were on 7.2. I apologize. Okay.
So 7.2?
Yeah, we're on 7.2. I thought that's, okay, I'm sorry, I had it open. Dr. Trujillo, that was the only other item, right?
We have an expenditure update, and then that's the end of the agenda.
Wait, where's the expenditure update? Oh, I apologize. I'd already crossed it off. I was jumping ahead. 8.1, fiscal year 22 expenditure update, November 2021.
President Grijalva, we can do this in any order. We still have the pending discussion and action on the emergency temporary standard for testing.
I apologize. I thought that was the item when we were done with that. Let's see. Okay, Dr. Trujillo, we will go to 7.2, consideration of draft policy.
Yes, President Grijalva, members of the board, thank you for delaying this item so that Dr. Gravoy-Shaw could be a part of probably one of the bigger decisions tonight. I'm going to ask Michael Aronoff, the primary author, our Associate General Counsel, if you will, Michael, be so gracious as to kind of just begin again from the beginning, going through the different portions and sections of the policy and explaining the governing board's options here tonight with regard to action. Mr. Aronoff.
But Mr. Aronoff, feel free to be brief because we have all read the item. Thank you.
Okay, I will be as brief as I can. I'll hit the highlights as far as what we're doing in the policy. You know, we have as I said before, the policy just tracks OSHA's requirements for the most part. You know, we've just talked about the inclusion of boosters in the incentive, right? The policy does not include boosters for someone to be fully vaccinated because that just tracks OSHA's requirement. And so it also doesn't provide, for the 4 hours of leave in order to get a booster. We've talked about the proof of vaccination, that the proofs that we're allowed to accept track the OSHA policies. But as I said before, the deadlines that are written in that policy, those December 5th deadlines, those will need to change. Our suggestion, assuming that if the policy were to be, passed immediately, we probably want February 1st deadline. As we've said, if the policy is going to be sort of conditioned on the enforcement or enforceability of the OSHA emergency temporary standard, then we'd suggest some language that gives us the ability to set the deadline at, for some appropriate time following when it's enforceable. We have the section on notice of positive tests and timing of the notice. As I said before, that just tracks out our calling in sick requirements. Returning to work follows the EPS and the CDC requirements. Our testing requirements just follow OSHA. The big difference, the sort of addition that we have in our testing requirements is that we'll accept pool testing, and we'll help. Our goal is to help provide pool testing on site for employees. But do note, as I said before, that at-home rapid tests don't qualify. If people don't want to participate in pool testing that's available, then they're going to have to get their own tests, and we'll be responsible for the cost of those. And then the last kind of big point is the face covering. The language is as I said before, it follows the OSHA requirement, but we still have the temporary regulation that requires face covering for all employees as well as everybody else on our campuses. And so, the language in this policy at least is going to be it's going to provide stricter face covering requirements for our employees simply because it follows the OSHA language. And those are the big points about the policy. If you have questions about the implementation logistics piece, we can go back to that as well. But those are kind of the salient pieces.
So really quickly, Mr. Arnoff, I know a lot of the dates have already passed, and so when we first discussed this item, it was more considering this item just in case things change with OSHA and there's some sort of change in implementation or something is worked out with the courts and then they start to implement a policy that we would already have one sort of in the hopper. And then I just have a question as to if that should pass, through the court system, will you then adjust these deadlines? Or would it come back to the board?
Our thinking is given authority by the board to implement it once the ETS is enforceable by OSHA. I think the board can give us the flexibility to set appropriate deadlines based on OSHA's requirements once it's actually enforceable. But that's exactly the thing is we don't know if and when the OSHA mandate would become enforceable. It's possible it will be enforceable next week. It's possible it could be, a couple months. It's also possible that it doesn't happen at all. And so it all depends on this litigation that's pending in the Sixth Circuit right now. So we want to be ready in case it is enforceable next week. And of course, we're talking about following the OSHA mandate. The board does have the authority to implement this regardless of whether OSHA requires it, but that's our sort of anticipation and our discussion is how do we set it up so that we're ready to implement and enforce it once the OSHA standard is enforceable.
Okay. Board members, questions? Oh, Dr. Ravi.
Thanks, President Grijalva. One quick change I'd like to see here, and then a more kind of larger comment. We've had a case in my own employment where someone got the first vaccine of a 2-shot series, but decided not to get the second shot. And so for the employees who are partially vaccinated on page 4, having an option for those who submit that they're not going to complete the vaccination series, so they will be subject to testing as well if they're not going to complete the series. So that's one change I would make to this document if that situation comes up. And then kind of more of a larger, kind of discussion here, I would not delay this at all. I know this isn't written to be, this is not written to be conditional to the OSHA requirement going into force, and I wouldn't add that condition into this. I think we saw the COVID numbers increase significantly after fall break. We get the daily reports, and I see that daily report every single day, and I've seen the numbers double and then triple after we came back from fall break. We'll probably see the same after Thanksgiving, and I'll be very surprised if we don't. We are going to see this increase again after winter break. And what this policy lets us do is require testing for those who aren't vaccinated. And we have the benefit that private employers and other organizations don't have, is that we have full testing available on site. So we are making it as easy as possible for everyone who decides not to vaccinate to get tested on a weekly basis by just participating in the pool at their sites. And we have that in place already. That will allow us to detect early cases of COVID, especially those that are pre-symptomatic or those who don't develop a lot of symptoms but are still transmissible, and decrease transmission. So I would not support delaying this. I would want this to go into effect January 4th.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Did you, Dr. Ravi, how would you like to, did you want to make a motion? Did you want to suggest some changes?
Thank you, President Grijalva. So I'll move to approve the policy as written, minus the addition of the option for those who only get 1 out of 2 shot series to declare they're not going to be vaccinated and then participate in the testing requirements.
I'll second for the sake of discussion.
And so the recommendation would be then if you've only received 1 dose of a 2-dose series, then you still have to be tested on a weekly basis. Okay. All right. Mr. Ross, or do you have any concerns about that modification? I don't, but
I'll let Michael answer that if he has any issues with it. I just want to make sure that we understand with this motion that we still will need to adjust the deadlines that have already passed that are written in it, and so I would ask that any motion include, or at least be implied, that the legal department has the authorization to adjust deadlines to comply with the January 4th deadline that Dr. Shah just mentioned.
Okay.
And as far as adjusting the language, if I'm understanding it right, in the chart to sort of include an extra category of people who have the 1 shot but who aren't going to finish their course of vaccination, I don't see any problem with including that. I think arguably it's covered by people who are not vaccinated, but I think if we want to include that to be clear that people with 1 vaccine and who aren't getting the second fall into that, then I don't think that's a problem at all.
Okay. Any other comments or questions, board members?
I have a question for Dr. Trujillo. Does this present any complication for you in rolling this out?
Former board president, board member Counts, thank you. Yeah, I was just going to speak to the comment that, and at this point, I'd like to invite our Chief Technology and Operations Officer, Mr. Blaine Young, along with our Director for Communications, Leslie Lenhart. As the administration has readied itself for any possible governing board action tonight, we took the liberty of engaging a third-party vendor. That vendor would provide the service of allowing us to create a database where individual employees would be able to sign on through a portal, create their own online profile, and upload their vaccination information /status. That information, of course, would be vital in terms of helping us implement this policy. The difficult aspect of it is the 3 or 4 weeks that the vendor would need to be able to set up this particular database. If we had a rollout that was effective immediately the first week of January, even the second week of January might be a little bit more feasible for us, only because we would be able to immediately engage the vendor this week and get that logistical work started. So that would be my concern. I know, Blaine, if you're on the call, if you want to add a little bit more.
No, Dr. Trujillo, thank you. That is very accurate. We've been engaged with the vendor. This is a turnkey system per se. It does everything that we need to do to track vaccination status as well as testing outcomes. It has a dashboard capability. It has the ability for each and every employee to have their own login and provide their information based on the protocols that are set up. The biggest thing would be to get it set up for our environment. And what the vendor has said is that through part of the acquisition of the system would include professional services that would be used for implementation. This is something the vendor that we've engaged is a very reputable vendor when it comes to delivering software systems. They use partners for that implementation, but they have said that a 4-week lead time from the time we execute the agreement. So if this is approved tonight and then we would immediately move on that process tomorrow, then we would work with them to do this as aggressively as we can. But we just want the board to know that it looks like it would be a 4-week runway to get this stood up. Leslie, anything you want to add to that?
No, the only other thing I would say that we were really impressed with is we does have the ability to upload and or download groups of data for both testing and or vaccine status. So for the district, it's very interactive in being able to get a lot of information easily from both the pulling stuff from Concentric and then putting it into this system.
Ms. Grijalva?
Yes, Ms. Counts.
So can this system be used for our benefit for those that are fully vaccinated as well? Yeah, okay.
Yes, yeah, we can pull the data once people load their information in. As Dr. Trujillo mentioned, everybody creates their own portal. They would load a picture of their vaccine card and all the information, and then we could pull down, which employees were fully vaccinated and what status they were at.
Okay, and Dr. Trujillo or Mr. Young, is the timeline, the window, a little bit of a stressor? Do we need to extend that a little bit, kind of like we did with the other item where it was to the end of January? I just want to make sure that it's something that you don't have to come back to the board about, that you weren't able to implement because we set some timelines.
In our discussions as a leadership team this morning, I believe and working also with legal, I believe we talked about at end of January might be the most feasible for us to be able to get the database in play and be able to get it fully and rolled out. Also, it's important to note that this is this will be subjected any OSHA victory. Obviously, if stay is lifted and OSHA enforcement is the law, we of course would have to immediately roll into a more standard data collection process, basically paper and pencil, to try to comply with any revised OSHA deadlines that may come with the lifting of the stay. So this is assuming that stay is not lifted and we're able to set our own deadlines. Yes, January 30th probably would be ideal for us.
Okay. Board members, what would you like to do?
Dr. Ravi, did you want to amend that date?
Sure. I mean, I would, I don't want to create a logistic nightmare for the district, of course, in moving forward with this. I think waiting until January 30th is too long. That's, 6-7 weeks away, and that's multiple weeks after the fall winter break when folks are coming back from a lot of family visits and travel. I'll be willing to delay a week, maybe 2 weeks if I can be convinced, with still a January 4th deadline, but the ability for our superintendent to push that back if logistically we're not ready January 4th. But really would want an expectation that this gets implemented as soon as possible.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing, Dr. Ravi, from administration is just the logistics of collecting the data and being able to adhere to the policy. Is that correct, Dr. Trujillo?
Yeah. Now, I'd like to try to meet Dr. Gervois-Shaw's here halfway and maybe pursue a middle of January. We can immediately engage this vendor. The services for this vendor fall far below the threshold for governing board approval, so it doesn't necessitate us having to return for governing board approval in January. We can move on the vendor now. It is the first week of December. We are essentially 2 weeks. We've got 2 weeks right now that we can get started on this and then really push the vendor so that we can be ready, set a January 4th deadline, but if need be, go to January 15th, because I do know that we can engage fairly quickly this week, and we can work to that end.
So I'm open to amending my original motion to have a January 4th deadline, but with the permission of Dr. Trujillo to decide to delay that if logistical issues prevent that to, I would say January 17th, that's a Monday.
Okay, I accept that.
And I just want to make sure that we're able to, it's not so much the implementation of the policy, it's the data collection. And so,
right.
You know, if we allow, if the motion would allow the flexibility, if we're not able to do that, we won't be able to meet before then. And so I guess, unless Dr. Trujillo, you know, you could add it to our, when it's our first meeting in January?
The 11th.
It's the 11th. We have
we have a administrative meeting.
We
but
have
they
an
actually-
like a leadership meeting.
Yes.
The organizational meeting, I think, is on the 4th?
On the 4th. And so, Dr. Trujillo, if for whatever reason you're not able to implement this and get the vendor together and do all of that, I mean, I think that there's some flexibility for you to bring that item to the January 4th meeting.
Yeah, and if it goes the other way, Osha, the stay is lifted next week, and the original January 4th deadline applies, we have no choice. We're
Right.
creating something using existing software to try to get people. So I think it's good to have the update anyway at our organizational meeting.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay.
Ms.
So
Corral?
yes, Dr. Ravi.
Okay, if I summarize what the motion is right now.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Okay, so the motion is to approve the policy as written with the following changes. Changing the deadlines on the submission of vaccine proof based on administration need to logistically operationalize this. Having a deadline of January 4th, but giving Dr. Trujillo permission if operational challenges prevent January 4th to delay that to January 17th to start implementing the testing and the policy in full. And just changing that for those employees who are partially vaccinated, who won't get fully vaccinated, to make the provision there for those who remain unvaccinated to get tested as well.
Yep. I think that summarizes it. Okay, so we had Dr. If I'm accurate, Dr. Ravi moved the item. Ms. Count seconded? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item passes unanimously 4-0. Okay. Now, are we done with 7.2?
Yes, now you can go to
And now we're moving
8.1.
on to 8.1. Okay. 8.1 is fiscal year 22 expenditure update, November 2021. Dr. Trujillo.
Yes, for our monthly expenditure update, here is Renee Weatherless.
Good evening. Thank you, President Grijalva, members of the Governing Board, Dr. Trio, and staff. I'm here to present our financials through the month of November. If you go ahead and go to the next slide. Basically, the highlight of the night is you're not seeing a lot of budget balance swings from the prior month. Everything's been pretty consistent. It's been trending from month to month. The one new thing that I would like to point out tonight is the far right column. We've been talking about our recruitment challenges. We've talked a lot about having positions and vacancies, and so what I've provided for you today, and also a separate attachment that goes into a little bit more detail, is to break down our vacant positions. So if you look at the first line for M&O, we have a total, and this does not include benefits, it's just salaries, and it's positions only, about $12.9 million of vacant positions. Now, for purposes of reading this report, that $12 million is included in that encumbrance line and that an encumbrance column and the total spend. So potentially, as we go through the year, those positions will alleviate some of the encumbrance. As time passes, that will dwindle down to zero as we get towards the end of the year. And I did break it out by funding source. The rest of this slide, it's pretty consistent. It's been trending from month to month. There's not much to highlight on here. But if we go to the next slide, please. So of those vacant positions, I broke them out for you by instructional and non-instructional. And the reason for that is I need everyone to understand what that vacancy means. In instructional, when you're talking about teachers, we have teaching vacancies every single year. And you see it across all funding sources. And we just talked about subs. A lot of those vacant positions do get picked up by subs, and so some of that money does get spent in the form of substitutes. However, on the non-instructional side, that's where you're saying we typically don't have subs on that end. And it's broken down by all the different funding sources. So if you look at that line for federal grants, for example, which is fairly high at 6.1 million, well, clearly, the primary source of those vacancies is ESSER. So of that 6.1, 4.1 million of that is vacant ESSER positions, and we have had that conversation in the past. The separate attachment that is part of this agenda item does take this slide, this chart, and it does break it down into all the different funds, so you could identify exactly what ESSER funds are isolated on there. The other thing I want to make note of is I broke out M&O between DSEG and non-DSEG, and there's a reason for that, because on the DSEG world, we do have a process if there is any monies that are available and unspent to do a reallocation. So we couldn't necessarily assume that that $3 million would automatically be available for carryover, because it is not. DSEG funds do not carry over. So that if that was an amount that was unspent and available, then that would be going through a reallocation process and get spent in the current year. Next slide, please. So just continuing on through the rest of this report, you're seeing on the DSEG side, the balance is at zero, and that is because we're making the assumption that the reallocation process would occur between now and June 30. And then on the non-DSEG side, so including, there was $9 million of, $9.9 million of vacancy savings. Beyond that, there's still right now a budget balance carry forward being projected of $2.8 million. So if you just made the assumption no position was filled between now and the end of the year, then we'd be looking at that $9.9 million of M&O non-DSEG vacancies plus this $2.8 million. That would be best case scenario. On capital, there's that $15.4 million that we talked about earlier on the capital agenda item. Next slide is just the breakout of our actual expenditures through November, broken out by the different types of expenditure, being salary, benefits, etc., and the funding sources. If you jump ahead 2 slides, we get to the fund balances. Again, the only highlight here, there's not a whole lot of movement going from month to month. The one thing I can say is that community school line, we are watching it. It is trending. The negative has been going down each month as we monitor those revenues and to get the benefit of the grants that are available in the community schools. If we do end the year with a negative, clearly that would have to be absorbed by another funding source, but we'll just continue to monitor that one. Next slide. And the next slide is the spending report. So here, every single month, we look at what our year-to-date expenditures are trending as far as instructional dollars, and I can say they are trending up. So the third column to the right, the instructional dollar for year-to-date is now at 52.6. So this number has gone up consistently every single month since the beginning of the year. When you take into account our encumbrances, we're back up to that level that we were at last year of 53%. So we will just continue tracking this. And the remaining slide, the next slide is the graph that we continue to post, and the following slide is just informational for the public on what goes into those categories. So that concludes my financial update. Do you have any questions?
Board members, any questions? Dr. Ravi.
President Grijalva, of course I have questions on this section and keeping everyone from ending the meeting here. My first question, we know that the ESSER funded positions can carry forward to a certain point. They end in a couple of years in terms of use it or lose it. And I'd asked for a presentation on the plan B on the funds that aren't being used. I hope that can come soon so we can see how we're spending the money, and especially those that we're going to lose. My first question is on the other grants, other federal grants and state grants and other things that aren't ESSER funded. how many of those are able to carry forward, and how many of those are lost if we don't use it in this school year?
So I can tell you, and this is in the attachment to the BAI, the majority of those in the federal area are Title I and IDEA. Whenever, and we deal with this on an annual basis, whenever we're having teaching vacancies, those monies do get reallocated and they do get spent within the grant cycle. So for Title I monies, if a school has a position that goes vacant in Title I, that's an annual process. They will go through, do a reallocation of their plan, their school plan, and they do spend those monies. So that they can be rolled over only to the extent of the grant itself.
Okay, so there's flexibility to repurpose some money if you're not using it for what you originally intended, as long as it's meeting the same requirements.
Correct.
And this question is to Ms. Hoyser, if she's still on. So with all the funds that aren't going to be spent, whether it's DSEG or other things, is there any kind of priority on recruitment for those positions? For example, the DSEG or other funds that don't carry forward, so that we are making sure that we use it before we lose it? Or should there be any kind of more effort on recruitment for those positions?
Can I jump in before she answers that? One of the things on the DSEG budget, if you go look at the budget book, we actually over allocated DSEG. So in some of the areas we budget and allocate out more than the 63 million, and then we budgeted a negative. So sometimes it's not always possible to reallocate every single dollar, but right now that is the total that you're looking at in the financial.
And from the HR lens, we don't necessarily look at funding line and prioritize in that way. I think we definitely should. We will definitely be looking at that going forward.
Those are my questions, President Grijalva. Thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions, board members? All right. So our next meeting is in January. Is that correct?
January, organizational meeting, January 4th.
Well, I just want to say, to all of our families, happy holidays. And since we won't be seeing you until 2022. So thank you. I hope you all have a safe and healthy holiday. Share it with family. Be safe. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you that stuck with us through the board meeting. And we'll see you next year.
See you in January.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.